I heard that when someone is dying, the last sense they lose is hearing. Jenny only realized it was true before she passed. She was cold and hungry, curled up at a street corner, listening to the cheers from a restaurant TV nearby. Congratulations to Mr. William and Miss Gina on their marriage. A perfect match. Jenny, shivering, tried to move closer to hear better. But just as she crawled up the steps, the owner kicked her away. Where did this beggar come from? Get out of here, you're bad for business. Her frail body couldn't take the hit, and she fell back onto the snow-covered street. At that moment, a familiar deep voice echoed from the restaurant speakers into her ears. Gina, you are my true love, forever. Each word was like a knife to her heart. Jenny coughed up blood, staining the pure white snow. The two on the TV were once her husband and her sister. In the end, her husband drove her family to bankruptcy, leading her father to jump off a building. Her sister blinded her, leaving Jenny to die on the streets with an illness. How could they still get married without any guilt? As all the sound began to vanish, immense regret engulfed her. She thought if there were a next life, she'd never want anything to do with them again. A tear slid down Jenny's hollow eyes as heavy snowflakes silently covered her body. The next day, the local news channel reported briefly that a woman's body was found on Lynn High Street. She was estimated to have died on November 13, 2028. It was believed the woman might be Jenny, the former only daughter of the J Group. February 16, 2023, early spring. City A, Central Hospital. Jenny lay on the hospital bed, looking at her phone to confirm the date. Her eyes filled with disbelief. She had gone back 5 years, back to the year she got engaged to William. Her head, wrapped in white bandages, ached, reminding her that everything was real, not a dream. Memories of her past life were vivid. The pain before she died seemed to linger, piercing and unforgettable. As she tried to process everything, her phone vibrated with a new message. Jenny, how come your solo performance got replaced by Gina? Memories rushed back. Jenny finally grasped the situation. 3 days ago, Gina asked her to go hiking and purposely slipped, pushing her down a slope, resulting in her concussion and coma. While she was unconscious, William never visited. Instead, he gave her solo performance to Gina. In her past life, she swallowed this grievance out of love for William. Jenny clenched her fist. With a second chance, she would not repeat her mistakes. That afternoon, Jenny went straight to W Group. She pushed open the door to the general manager's office. The man behind the desk looked up coldly. Facing William, Jenny's heart skipped a beat. She thought she could stay calm, but seeing him again, all those feelings surged back: love, hate, bitterness. This man was her fiancé, the one she loved since childhood, and the one who led her to ruin in her previous life. She squeezed her hand and asked hoarsely, I've heard you switched my solo for Gina. Why? Swallowing the painful sting in her chest, Jenny looked deeply at him. William's tone was indifferent, annoyed by being interrupted. You insisted on hiking close to the performance date and got hurt. Your sister graciously filled in for you. You should thank her. Thank her? Jenny felt a stab in her heart. Her voice turned cold. Gina's not my sister, and I won't thank someone who pushed me off a cliff. Gina's real name was Lily, a student J Group sponsored. Jenny had publicly announced her as a sister to express gratitude. In her past life, Jenny never thought twice. She often took Gina to various events upon Gina's request. Eventually, everyone assumed Gina was J Group's adopted daughter, Jenny's sister. William, annoyed, furrowed his brows. You're slandering Gina over a solo spot. When did you become so petty? Jenny's heart wrenched. William always blindly favored Gina in things concerning her. Ironically, she only realized this after dying. Seeing her silence, William added, I'm busy. Don't waste my time with this nonsense. Jenny blinked back tears, her voice calm. William, let's call off the engagement. William was genuinely taken aback, but before he could speak, the door burst open. No way. I don't agree. A graceful woman in a white dress rushed in. Gina looked at Jenny tearfully. Don't say things like that because of me. But she clutched William's sleeve. William, convince my sister not to be mad. Jenny watched Gina's little sister act, a farce played since her past life. Gina always appeared innocent, pitiable, shedding tears, making anyone opposing her seem wicked and vile. Jenny was supposedly the worst of them all. Her lips curled slightly. Gina, are you comfortable in my spot? She meant both the solo and the place beside William. Gina turned pale, withdrawing her hand, tears flowing instantly. Jenny, I'm sorry. I apologize, she stammered. Before Jenny could respond, William interjected, Jenny, that's enough. Stop targeting Gina. Besides, quit the schemes, he added coldly, a hint of impatience in his eyes. If you want to call off the engagement, ask J Group first. Remember, you all came to us with the proposal. Jenny's heart tightened suddenly, and her face turned pale. This marriage was definitely J Group reaching too high for W Group. And the fact that she was giving her all for William was no secret. My future wife should be generous, understanding, and graceful, not someone like you, who's petty and jealous. Jenny, I think you ought to reflect on yourself. William's words of blame came down hard, and behind him, Gina looked on with a satisfied glint in her eyes. Jenny clenched her fists tightly. But in the end, she didn't say another word. What could she say? In a previous life, her complaints hadn't been enough. No matter how much she said, those who didn't care would hear nothing. She pressed her lips together, turned on her heel, and left William's office. Jenny took the elevator to the parking lot, but midway, the elevator doors suddenly opened. When she looked up, her gaze locked with a pair of deep, dark eyes. The man was tall, with sharply defined features, but his cold aura made people overlook his strikingly handsome face. Recognizing him, Jenny's heart skipped a beat, and she instinctively greeted him, Uncle. It was Charles, the current head of W Group, and William's uncle. Unfortunately, he wouldn't live long due to a car accident, after which William would become the heir of W Group. Charles stepped into the elevator, his gaze sweeping over her indifferently, his tone cold. Are you here to see William? Jenny forced a smile but shook her head. No, I won't be looking for him again. She kept her head down and didn't notice Charles's eyes flickering with emotion at her word sting. The elevator door opened slowly. Jenny respectfully said goodbye. Uncle, I've reached my stop. Goodbye. Leaving the W Group, Jenny returned to the J Group villa. After her mother passed away, her father never remarried, leaving outsiders to think he was a devoted husband and good father. But in reality, Jenny knew he had an illegitimate child who was almost an adult. Her father was eager to marry her off to gain more benefits for his illegitimate son. Sam came home late and seemed surprised to see Jenny. They hadn't shared a meal together since she moved out at 18. After dinner, Sam spoke in a warning tone. I heard you caused a scene with William over Gina. Jenny's heart sank, but she spoke up. Dad, I want to break off the engagement. Hearing this, Sam's face turned stern, and the next moment, he slapped Jenny hard across the face. Nonsense. The burning pain on her face was nothing compared to the pain in her heart. Holding her cheek in disbelief, she looked at Sam. Dad. Sam looked furious, showing no remorse for hitting her. I worked hard to connect with W Group, and now you want to break off the engagement over something so trivial? I'm telling you, you must marry him. Even if there's something between Gina and William, it doesn't matter. Her heart felt like it was being stabbed. Her throat tightened, and Jenny couldn't say a word. She hadn't expected Sam to be so cold-hearted toward her. After Sam's harsh words, he returned to his room. Jenny stood there stunned in the vast living room. The pain on her face was nothing compared to the ache in her heart. The next day, Jenny went to the theater. Since her mother was a famous dancer, Jenny loved dancing from a young age. After graduating college, she joined a dance troupe sponsored by W Group to get closer to William and worked hard for years to become the lead dancer. In a past life, her leg was injured by Gina, forcing her to give up dancing. Now, given another chance, she almost cried with emotion when she put on her dance clothes again. At the rehearsal studio, Jenny practiced her dance moves in the lead dancer's area as usual. It wasn't long before Gina arrived, looking cautious, and approached Jenny pitifully. "Jenny, this is my spot now." In an instant, everyone's attention turned toward them. Seeing Gina's pitiable expression, some couldn't help but voice their dissatisfaction. Jenny's being a bully, demanding to take back the lead dance role after missing her solo due to an accident. Hearing these words, Jenny looked towards the dance troupe leader, her voice calm. "The solo dance was given to Gina temporarily due to an accident. Does that mean my lead dancer position is also given to her?" Susan, the leader, looked awkward, unsure how to respond. "Jenny," William said. "Isn't William my fiancé?" Jenny's question left everyone stunned. Yeah, William was supposed to be Jenny's fiancé, so why would he favor another woman over her? Suddenly, everyone looked at Gina differently. Gina's expression of grievance almost slipped. Jenny coldly said to Gina, "Gina, if you want something, take it openly. Using a man isn't fair. Our dance troupe has always awarded the lead dancer position based on merit." Then Jenny turned to Susan. "So Susan, can I challenge Gina to a dance-off to decide who gets the lead role?" The room buzzed with chatter. Yeah, the lead dancer position was always based on monthly rankings, and Jenny was consistently at the top. This time, Gina was an exception. A dance-off was the fairest way. Even Susan agreed, looking at Gina. "Gina, if that's the case, have a dance-off with Jenny." Gina's face turned pale with guilt. She knew her skills couldn't match Jenny's. Meanwhile, Jenny calmly looked at her, waiting for her response. Then, the rehearsal room door made a noise, and William walked in, protectively standing in front of Gina and coldly telling Jenny, "No need for a dance-off. If I say she's the lead dancer, she is." Jenny's heart felt like it was being stabbed. But she stood tall, clenching her fists tightly as she looked at William. "This is an internal matter of the dance troupe. Who are you to interfere?" William's eyes darkened. "W Group sponsors this troupe. That's why." His words silenced the room. Her nails dug into her palms, her heart filled with pain. Jenny forced a bitter smile. "If that's what you want, I have nothing more to say." With that, she gathered her things and left the rehearsal room directly. She had just reached the parking lot and was about to open the car door. Suddenly, she heard someone running after her and felt a strong grasp on her arm. "Jenny. Please don't be mad." Gina clung to her with an intense look of distress in her eyes. "Jenny, if you don't like me being the lead dancer, I can give up the role for you." The word "give" stung, mocking Jenny's lack of confidence. It left her feeling blocked and stifled. Not wanting to argue with this woman any longer, she took a deep breath and tried to shake Gina off. "Let go." But Gina started crying instantly, clinging to Jenny tightly, her knees bending, about to kneel. "Please forgive me. If you aren't mad at me, I promise I won't dance anymore." Jenny felt a wave of nausea. The next moment, she saw William catching up, quickly helping Gina to her feet, and sternly admonishing her, "Jenny." Her heart sank. Jenny couldn't hold it anymore. The emotion she'd been suppressing exploded, and she shot back at him just as sharply, "William." He was stunned. Her eyes filled with tears. "Do you even count as my fiancé?" With that, she walked around them, got in her car, and drove off. William's lips tightened, watching her car disappear, his brow furrowing in confusion. Seeing this, Gina looked up pathetically at William. "William, I'm sorry. It's all my fault. I upset her again." William coolly diverted his gaze. "It's not your fault. She's the one causing trouble." The next day, Jenny walked into the theater office with her resignation letter from last night. Since she wasn't getting fair treatment in the dance troupe sponsored by the W Group, she'd leave this ridiculous place. But before she could turn it in, Susan spoke first. "Jenny, this is a termination notice for you from William." Her mind went blank. Jenny froze, clutching the resignation letter in her hand. She could leave the troupe on her own, but being kicked out by William was entirely different. After leaving the theater, she called William directly. "William, you kicked me out for Gina?" After a long silence, William chuckled coldly. Is this your new trick? Jenny was puzzled. Your father called me, saying you want to be the lady of W group and don't want to dance in public anymore. And now you ask me why I kicked you out? Jenny, if you're going to put on a show, you should coordinate stories with your family first. Those words hit her like a ton of bricks. Jenny was speechless. Thinking she had nothing to say, he continued indifferently, let's drop this. There's a banquet tonight. I'll pick you up. Delivered like an order, he hung up right after. The beeping from the phone hit Jenny's heart like a hammer. Jenny looked at Sam's number in her contacts, but she didn't dial it. In the evening, William picked Jenny up for the banquet as planned. The sound of violins was pleasant, and the champagne tower reflected the grandeur of the event. Shortly after they entered, there was a commotion at the entrance. Jenny looked up. In the center of the crowd was a tall, indifferent-looking man. It was Charles. Jenny was surprised since Charles rarely attended events like this. She wondered what kind of big shot at the banquet could draw him out. William immediately led her over to greet him. Uncle, what brings you here? Charles swept a gaze over where Jenny was holding William's arm and pressed his lips tightly. He then looked at William, with a warning gleaming in his dark eyes. I've been hearing rumors about your private life, William. Remember, your fiancée is Jenny. Don't shame the family. Jenny was taken aback. She didn't expect Charles to be the one to stand up for her. William's expression froze, and he bowed his head. I understand, Uncle. With that, Charles gave Jenny a nod and walked away. Once Charles left, William angrily shook Jenny's hand off, face dark. So you went to my uncle to complain now? Should I be impressed? Jenny's heart ached. William didn't give her a chance to explain before turning and walking away. Watching his back, she turned away herself, holding her wine glass. After a few steps, she heard a voice she despised. Jenny. Upon turning, she frowned, noticing Gina wearing the same dress as her. Gina approached with a face full of excitement. Jenny wasn't planning to engage, but then Gina suddenly bumped straight into her. Unprepared, Jenny's wine spilled all over Gina's chest. The red wine stain was shocking against the white dress. Gina looked full of grievance and confusion. Why would you do this to me? Everyone started looking their way. Noticing the commotion, William quickly came over. He shielded Gina and coldly questioned Jenny, what are you doing now? The familiar scene felt almost laughable to Jenny, leaving her cold inside. She replied flatly, she's the one who ran into me. Gina bit her lip, looking pale and timidly glancing at Jenny. William, if Jenny says I ran into her, then let's say it was my fault. Don't argue with her over it. She bit her lip and lowered her head. I'll make sure not to wear the same outfits again and upset Jenny. Watching all this, William's gaze at Jenny filled with disgust. People around began whispering, pointing fingers at Jenny. Her chest felt unbearably tight. Watching Gina, Jenny's lips curled into a cold smile. If you're claiming I spilled it, then I might as well make it true. With that, she swiftly raised her hand, throwing the remaining wine all over Gina. Gina's tears started to fall like a waterfall. Jenny. The anger in William's eyes was almost visible. He glared at her coldly, apologized to Gina. Jenny, with red eyes, stared back defiantly, what if I don't? At that moment, William grabbed a wine glass from the table. The next second, red liquid was poured over Jenny's head. The wine ran down her soaked hair and dripped onto the floor. William slammed the glass down. I think you need to cool off. The scent of wine filled the air. Jenny stood there, disheveled, watching William leave with Gina. Her last bit of hope vanished. She gave a self-deprecating smile, ignored the onlookers, and walked out proudly. Upstairs in the banquet hall, Charles watched the whole scene unfold below. His gaze was fixed on the stubborn, slender figure leaving, his expression unreadable. Jenny made it to the parking lot just as William and Gina drove off in the car they'd arrived in. The car sped past her, and she instinctively stepped back, feeling a sharp pain in her ankle, losing balance and falling forward. In her stumbling, warm hands caught her. Are you alright? A calm voice sounded next to her ear. Jenny looked up, realizing it was Charles. Her heart skipped a beat, and she quickly stood up. I'm fine. Charles withdrew his hand slowly. Let me drive you home. The banquet was hosted at a manor in the suburbs. Jenny, not expecting William to come back for her, hesitated, thanked him, and got in Charles's car. The black Maybach drove smoothly. It was unusually quiet inside. Jenny sat next to Charles in the back seat, sneaking a look at the powerful man next to her. She instinctively sat up straighter, holding her breath. This was the first time Jenny sat beside him. It was interesting that in her past life, she had little to do with Charles, yet this life they'd crossed paths several times. Halfway through the drive, the driver made a sharp turn. Jenny, caught off guard, fell onto the person next to her. The faint scent of pine filled her senses. She tried to get up quickly, but her hair got tangled in Charles's cufflinks, only pulling tighter with movement. Don't move, let me. Charles's slightly hoarse voice came from above. Sorry for the trouble, Uncle. Jenny lowered her head, her ears burning with embarrassment. Her soft voice seemed to come from against his chest. Charles took a breath, calmly untangling her hair. His fingers were slightly shaky, but gentle, layered with meaning that flickered in his ever-calm, dark eyes. As he untangled the strands, he collected his emotions, returning to his cool, composed self. All done. Thank you. Jenny sighed in relief, looking up to find Charles turning away. A strange awkwardness filled Jenny. Just as she racked her brain for something to say, Charles spoke up. About today, I'll make sure William gives you an explanation. Jenny's heart tightened, and she simply replied, Thank you, Uncle. The car soon reached Jenny's home. As she got out, Charles asked her suddenly, Jenny, do you still like watching fireworks? Jenny paused. She couldn't even remember the last time she'd watched fireworks in both her past and present life. But the memory of their beauty brought a smile to her lips. I do. That's good. Seeing the faint smile on Charles's face made Jenny halt, almost thinking she was seeing things. For the next while, Jenny started sending resumes to other dance groups. She thought she'd quickly find a new place she loved, but every resume seemed to vanish into thin air. Jenny reached out to colleagues who had shown interest in recruiting her. On the other end, they were speechless. Please, don't make it hard for our small troupe. Your fiancé publicly announced you're quitting the scene. Who would dare keep you? Jenny was shocked, gripping her knuckles tight. William had gone this far for Gina, practically forcing her into a dead end. She made to confront him. But Sam called. Answering, she heard Sam's anger. Jenny, why aren't you here yet? Did you forget what today is? Jenny glanced at the electronic calendar clock in the living room. March 6, 2023. She finally remembered it was the family gathering they'd scheduled. At the top hotel in a city, Jenny sat next to William, listening to Sam and William's mother, Maria, discussing wedding plans. She stared straight ahead, quietly asking William, Are you crazy? Who let you announce I'd quit dancing? William frowned, but before he could reply, Maria glanced down at Jenny. Jenny, I heard you left the dance troupe. Finally, you've done something right. I always said, as the future daughter-in-law of W Group, you shouldn't be out there dancing around like an actress. This is good. Stay home and take care of the family from now on, okay? Maria's words were like needles in Jenny's ears. She tightened her grip on the chopsticks, not responding. In her past life, she quit dancing after marrying William. She locked herself in the role of Mrs. Zhou, thinking it was a happy family. But it caged her dreams and life. For 3 years, her world revolved around William, centering her life on him. In return, William would stay out all night, too annoyed to spare her a glance. While she guarded their home day by day, William frequently appeared with Gina at events outside. Eventually, when William asked for a divorce, he said while Gina was excellent and pretty, winning awards, he didn't think Jenny compared. You're not even presentable enough to take as my date. Every word was piercing and everlasting. Jenny snapped out of her unsettling memories, putting her chopsticks down, her eyes clear and sharp. She looked at Maria with a determined and serious expression. "Aunt, I've never given up on dance, and I never will. I am here to tell you that I want to break off." Before she could say engagement, William interrupted her sharply. "Mom, I'm taking Jenny out for a chat." He then pulled Jenny up and led her outside the room. Once outside, William pushed Jenny against the wall, hard. "If you're going to act out, there's a limit. Think twice about what you say in front of my mom." Jenny winced at the cold, hard wall pressing against her back. Her eyebrows knitted tightly. She retorted, "I'm not acting out, I'm serious." Her eyes were calm and cold, showing not a hint of jest. Sensing her seriousness, William felt a wave of irritation coupled with confusion. "I don't care what games you're playing. The engagement between our families is set. You should just prepare to be my wife." He strode away with a resolute back. Watching him leave, Jenny's heart sank as if into a bottomless pit. At that moment, she deeply understood that as long as she married this man, everything would follow the path of her previous life. That night, back home, Jenny tweeted, "This is Jenny. I'm announcing my breakup with W Group CEO, William. From now on, we're nothing to each other." Less than 2 hours later, it became the top trending topic locally. Jenny braced herself for the backlash from Sam and the W Group. Half an hour later, when she checked Twitter again, her post was gone. When she refreshed, she found she couldn't even log into her account, only seeing the message, "Your account has been blocked due to unusual activity." Meanwhile, the J Group's official account had put out an apology, supposedly from her, "I'm Jenny. Earlier, my account was hacked, spreading false claims. Please disregard them. I sincerely apologize to W Group for any negative impact caused and hope the wedding proceeds smoothly." Her dignity was thrown aside, and beneath the post were heaps of mocking comments. "How afraid is Jenny of W Group ditching her? I've heard she begged for this marriage. Didn't believe it before, but now I'm convinced." As she read these words, Jenny clenched her fists, her chest burning with indignation and frustration. She confronted Sam. "Dad, did you block my Twitter and send that apology?" "Yes." Sam didn't deny it and eyed her coldly. "Jenny, I've invested so much in your marriage. You'll marry into the W Group, like it or not." Jenny felt no warmth of a father's love in Sam at that moment. She felt a chilling despair, her voice hoarse. "Dad, sometimes I wonder if I'm really your daughter." Perhaps her look was too sorrowful. Sam's face briefly softened, but it quickly vanished. "Because you're my daughter, it's only right for you to repay my upbringing," he commanded sternly. "Go apologize to William right now." The pain in her heart spread through Jenny. She felt utterly defeated. She took a deep breath and said coldly, "I'm not going, and I will not marry William." Sam's expression turned icy. He called over several bodyguards, instructing them, "Take Jenny to the old house. Don't let her come back and cause trouble before the wedding." "Dad! You can't." Jenny's eyes widened in disbelief, but her resistance was futile. The guards advanced and took her away. At the J Group's old mansion, it was the third day Jenny had been locked up. That morning, she overheard news. W Group President Charles will arrive at such and such hotel on the 10th for an important project signing. Her heart skipped a beat. Jenny remembered that Charles had a car accident on the 11th. It was Charles's death that led William to become the new heir of W Group. With no one to restrain him, William's behavior worsened, marking the start of Jenny's misfortunes. The security was tight. It took a lot of effort, but Jenny eventually escaped. She ran straight to the hotel. Luckily, she saw Charles just as he was leaving the hotel. Jenny hurried up to him. "Uncle, you can't go to the signing tomorrow." Charles paused, raising a hand to stop his bodyguards. "Why?" He looked at Jenny's slippers with slight disapproval. Trying to stay calm, Jenny gave an excuse she'd prepared long ago. "There's a threat against you at the signing. If you go, you might be in danger." She tightly clutched her hands, ready to dodge any questions about her information source. Rather than questioning her, Charles explained, "The signing is crucial. I must attend." "I'm sorry." Jenny was taken aback and blurted, "Then let me come with you." With me? Charles seemed a bit surprised, his dark eyes examining her, filled with countless thoughts. Jenny grew anxious, about to persuade him further when Charles simply nodded. Okay. Jenny was stunned again, but Charles told his assistant, get a pair of shoes for Miss Jenny. For some reason, Jenny's ears turned red again. At 8 p.m. Charles took her to dine at the hotel's rooftop restaurant. The night breeze was gentle, and you could see the whole city's night view from there. Midway through, Charles suddenly asked, I saw your tweet, do you want to call off the engagement? Jenny was taken aback. She didn't expect him to bring it up. After a moment of silence, she smiled wryly and nodded. Yeah, but it's not just up to me anymore. Announcing the engagement cancellation without consulting the W group was careless on my part. I'm sorry. Hearing this, something flickered in Charles's eyes. He looked down and said quietly, you have nothing to apologize for. Jenny's heart skipped a beat. Charles was the first person to understand her. Suddenly, there was a loud bang. Fireworks lit up the sky brilliantly. Reflected in Jenny's eyes, it shone dazzlingly bright, and she stood up in awe. Beautiful, she said. Just then, she heard Charles's voice again, Happy birthday, Jenny. Her heart jolted. She'd forgotten today was her birthday. Her phone's message bar was empty. Charles was the only one who remembered her birthday. She felt a mix of emotions. Softly, Jenny said, Thank you, Uncle. Hearing her call him Uncle, Charles's gaze darkened slightly, but he just nodded. At 10 that night, Charles returned to his hotel room. After closing the door, his assistant followed him in, bowing his head and admitting fault. William, after a recheck, it turns out the car's brake pads were tampered with. The suspect is still under investigation. Charles's eyes darkened, giving a cold order, find the suspect quickly. Yes. The assistant complied, then hesitated before asking again, but since Miss Jenny seems to know so much, shouldn't we investigate her? Mentioning Jenny, Charles immediately interrupted. No need. The assistant replied, got it, and was about to leave after the business was done. Then Charles suddenly called him back and handed over a gift box. Send this to Jenny and say it was a last-minute purchase. Isn't this custom-made? The assistant was a bit surprised and confused. Didn't you just deliver it yourself? The room fell silent. Charles's eyes darkened further, and he simply said, she hasn't officially broken off her engagement, so it's not appropriate. Understood, said the assistant, William. On the other side, Jenny sat on the hotel sofa, casually browsing Instagram. After a few swipes, she suddenly stopped. Gina posted, thanks to William for celebrating my 3rd anniversary with the dance group. The post was a grid of Disney trip photos. Each picture had William in it, looking like they're a couple in love. Jenny's lips curled up in a way that could have been a bitter smile or sarcasm. He forgot her birthday as his fiancée but remembered Gina's anniversary. Luckily, her heart no longer felt any loss over this. Jenny thought for a moment, gave it a like, and then closed the app. The doorbell rang just then. Opening the door, it was Charles's assistant. Miss Jenny, this is a birthday gift from William. Charles actually went out of his way to get her a gift? Jenny received it, opened it to find a beautiful bracelet, and her face lit up. Thank you, please tell Uncle I love it. The assistant nodded and was about to leave, but as Jenny was closing the door, he turned back and said, Miss Jenny, actually, William sets off fireworks every year on this same day. Jenny froze, unable to ask more before the assistant bowed and left. Her heart gave an unexpected flutter. The gift box in her hand suddenly felt hot. What did that mean? Could it be that Charles has been setting off fireworks in Tongcheng on this day every year for her? As soon as this thought arose, Jenny shook her head quickly and closed the door. No, she must be overthinking it. The next day, in City A, William opened Instagram and saw Jenny's like on Gina's post, his lips curling into a mocking smile. After staging the Twitter drama, what's this new stunt? Just as he was about to put down his phone, a friend's call came in. William, why is your fiancé attending a meeting with your uncle? What's going on? William paused. What nonsense are you talking about? That's impossible. Who's lying to you? I saw it with my own eyes. Hanging up, William received a photo from his friend. Even though it was just their backs, he recognized the two of them instantly. His heart inexplicably sank. Checking his chat logs, he realized Jenny hadn't contacted him in 5 days. No matter the fight, Jenny would usually reach out within a day. An unexpected feeling of frustration crept in. He dialed Jenny's number immediately. And like always, the call was picked up quickly, but just as he was about to question, "Jenny, you?" The call was abruptly dropped. Listening to the busy tone, William's face turned extremely dark. Meanwhile, Jenny put her phone away without much expression. Charles witnessed her actions silently, pursing his lips without saying much. The whole day passed without incident. Coming back to the hotel, Jenny felt completely relieved seeing this. Charles's eyes held a hint of a smile. "Are you happy?" "I'm happy you're okay," Jenny replied with a glowing smile. Charles gazed at her, something intense flickering deep in his eyes, ready to burst forth. Yet, when Jenny looked his way, that emotion disappeared as quickly as it appeared, like it never existed. "Tomorrow, come back to City A with me," he said after a pause. "With me around, your father won't dare do anything to you." Jenny almost rejected him, but after a moment of thought, she sincerely thanked him. "Thank you." Seeing Charles nod and turn, she sighed lightly in relief. The next day, the two headed back to City A. City A's familiar scenery flew past the car window. Jenny silently looked at Charles's reflection in the window and pondered, "Does this mean I saved Charles? And does it also mean I can change destiny?" Just then, the car suddenly jolted. Her eyes darted forward, pupils narrowing sharply. Ahead, a large truck was coming the wrong way, heading straight for them. "Watch out." In the W Group's general manager's office, William's phone screen had been stuck on a piece of news for a while now. The headline was bold and read, "One bride, two husbands. Jenny and her fiancé's Uncle Charles in life and death situation." The picture was of Jenny worriedly helping Charles into an ambulance. William's grip on the phone was so tight it seemed like he might crush it. At City A's Central Hospital, Jenny walked toward the hospital room with some food she just bought. In that split second of the car accident, her mind went blank. If it weren't for Charles shielding her, she would be the one lying in the hospital now. Fortunately, Charles's driver's skills averted a crisis. Jenny reached the hospital room door just as William was coming out. They almost bumped into each other. "I'd locked," Jenny paused, nodded slightly, and spoke first. "You just visited Uncle?" Her reserved demeanor, coupled with the food obviously meant for Charles, fueled William's anger. He coldly grabbed her, trying to pull her away. Her wrist throbbed with pain. Jenny struggled, her brow furrowing in displeasure. "What are you doing?" Her reaction only irked William more. He spoke coldly, "I know making headlines with my uncle was a misunderstanding. I won't hold it against you. But you should stop here. Stirring up these scandals for my attention only makes a joke of our families." Hearing this, Jenny stared deeply at the man before her. In her previous life, words like these would tear her apart. But having lived again and seen the true colors of her past love, these words no longer stirred her heart. What's left was merely absurdity. "So, you came to blame me," Jenny lifted her gaze coldly, a smirk on her lips, "but I don't think I'm guilty or that I did anything wrong." With that, she briskly shook off William's grip and walked past him. As his hand fell away, a strange void tightened around William's heart. He knitted his brows and abruptly called after her. "Jenny. What's gotten into you? If you want to dance again, I can get you a new dance company, as long as you stop picking on Gina. Do whatever you want." Hearing this, Jenny stopped. See, even in his condescending gestures, he couldn't forget to protect Gina. Closing her eyes briefly, Jenny turned to him. The moment William saw her expression, he froze. Under the cold lights, the indifference in her eyes was so real. Jenny spoke calmly, "William, the reason you've bossed me around like this is because I used to love you. But now, I might have forgotten to tell you, she slightly smiled, I don't love you anymore. Instantly, it felt like all sounds vanished. Every word William wanted to say got stuck in his throat, an indescribable discomfort in his chest. After speaking, Jenny decisively turned, opened the hospital room door, and went inside, leaving only the empty corridor behind. William clenched his fist, a dark expression clouding his eyes. Jenny went inside, placed the food down, and addressed Charles. Sorry if you had to wait. I got held up. Charles's gaze flickered toward the door, seemingly asking casually, how did the talk with William go? It's finally clear, Jenny thought for a moment before replying. At her words, a barely noticeable hint of delight flickered in Charles's eyes. Meanwhile, her phone rang. It was Sam. Jenny frowned, stepping out to take the call. Once connected, Sam immediately asked, Jenny, is what they said on the news true? Jenny's brow furrowed. She expected Sam to accuse her, but instead, he laughed, if you just told me you're with a big shot like Charles, I wouldn't oppose breaking off the engagement with William. The obvious eagerness and joy made Jenny quickly grasp his intentions. Compared to William, the general manager, Charles, the head of W Group, would be a bigger catch. Jenny tightened her grip and spoke icily. Don't even think about it. There's nothing between Charles and me, nor will there ever be. Jenny's tone was firm, frigid. Dad, I'll never get involved with anyone from W Group ever again. With those words, she hung up. Turning around, she met Charles's gaze, feeling inexplicably uneasy. Jenny diverted her gaze first, trying to make small talk. Uncle, if you need anything, just let me know. But Charles got straight to the point. Do you have any plans next? Jenny lowered her eyes, falling silent. She didn't want to relive the ridiculous love triangle of her past or meet the tragic end she once did. She wanted her own life, living for herself. Though it didn't feel appropriate to share these plans with this man, for some reason, she told the truth. I want to leave J Group, leave City A, and never return. This time, it was Charles who stayed silent for a long time before speaking in a somber tone. All right, if that's what you really want, I'll help you. Jenny looked up in surprise, meeting his deep, unreadable eyes. Suddenly, images of romantic fireworks and his assistant's words about the annual fireworks show on this day clouded her mind. Her heartbeat inexplicably quickened. A couple of days later, Charles was discharged, and Jenny returned to her apartment in City A. One evening, she received an anonymous message. Jenny, if you want to call off the engagement, come to the theater's backstage lounge immediately. She eyed that message for a long time, her brows tightly knitted. An anonymous text, she couldn't be sure of the sender's intent. But her eyes lingered on the words call off the engagement, her gaze darkening. Jenny went to the upstairs lounge, finding the door ajar. Pushing it open, her steps halted at the entrance. The air reeked of alcohol, with clothes scattered messily on the floor. On the couch, a tangled couple, William and Gina. Hearing the noise, William woke, panic flashing across his face when he saw Jenny. What are you doing here? As he spoke, he immediately pushed away the person lying in his arms and hurriedly got dressed. Gina, shoved by him, quickly hid under a thin blanket with a panicked look on her face and cried out, Jenny. This scene was all too familiar. Jenny stood frozen, memories flooding her mind. In her past life, she caught these two cheating after they were married. Back then, she loved William with all her heart. Seeing this, her mind went blank, and she screamed hysterically, attacking him. But before her hands could even touch Gina, William stopped her midair. He shoved her away fiercely, reprimanding her. Gina's face is for the stage. Try touching her if you dare. Jenny, look at you, a vicious shrew. Where's the trace of a wife in you? William's disgusted and indifferent look back then was etched deep in Jenny's memory. Even living through another life couldn't erase it. It was like a hidden wound in her heart suddenly split open, causing a faint pain. Coming back to her senses, she suppressed her inner hurt and, under their surprised gazes, clapped her hands twice. With a hint of sarcasm, she lightly smiled. Gina, congratulations on getting what you wanted. And congrats to you too, lovebirds, finally being together. Hearing this, William was stunned and frowned. He thought Jenny would scream and make a scene but never expected her calmness. A strange panic rose within him that he couldn't shake off, and he hurriedly stepped forward to explain, "It was an accident today. I drank too much. Please believe me." The room indeed smelled strongly of alcohol. "I believe you," Jenny looked at him, a smirk playing on her lips, "so what?" Her attitude just made William's unease worse. He instinctively stepped closer, grabbing her hand, speaking seriously like making a commitment. "It was just a mistake, Jenny. You're the one I want to marry." Once he said that, the room fell silent. Gina, who was pretending to sob, paused, disbelief and jealousy rising in her eyes. Jenny, momentarily surprised, couldn't help but find it ridiculous and laughable. She shook off William's hand, her face turning cold. "William, don't make me look down on you." Suddenly, William's expression turned sour. Jenny didn't want to stay there another minute and turned to leave the room. But barely reaching the staircase, someone suddenly grabbed her arm. It was Gina, who had followed, disheveled. "Jenny, I didn't mean to. Please don't be mad at William." Gina cried and begged, pulling on Jenny's hand, then dropped to her knees, tears streaming down. "I won't fight you for William. Just see me as a stray. I just need a glance from him. To stay by his side is enough." Gina clung to her tightly. Just being touched by someone like this made Jenny feel sick. She coldly ordered, "Let go." But Gina gripped even tighter, glancing at the steep stairs, a cruel glint in her eyes. Next moment, Jenny felt the force holding her suddenly release. Then she saw Gina rolling down the stairs. Jenny's eyes widened, instinctively reaching to grab her, but she was too late. Outside the emergency room, Jenny and William waited in silence. Soon, the emergency light turned off, and a doctor emerged. Just as Jenny was about to go over, William rushed past her. "Doctor, how is she?" "Her left shin is shattered. She probably won't be able to do any strenuous activities from now on." Jenny was left standing there, stunned. In the next moment, William stormed over. Before Jenny could react, he slapped her. "Jenny, do you have to be so against Gina?" The slap came without restraint. Jenny, caught off guard, felt a ringing in her ears, her pale face instantly swelling red. The burning pain spread from her cheek to her heart. Suddenly, Jenny remembered, in her past life, when Gina had ruined her legs, what did William say? Back then, he looked down on her in her wheelchair with arrogance. "Your legs were useless to begin with. Better be broken and stay home. Stop causing trouble by coming out." The hate she thought she wanted to let go of, erupted anew with that slap. Jenny's eyes stung red. Clasping her cheek, she slowly turned to William with a voice as if tearing through 1,000 blades. "William, this is the second time you hit me for her." "Second time?" William was taken aback, but Jenny gave him no chance to speak, turning and leaving. His right hand tingled with a numbness where he had just struck her. Her decisive, hateful gaze kept replaying in his mind. William felt a strange tug in his heart. A remorse he didn't realize crept up on him. After hesitating a moment, he called his assistant with an order. "Buy the latest designer jewelry." "All right, should it still be delivered to Miss Gina's place?" The assistant asked. William paused. "No, send it to Jenny." There was a beat of surprise over the phone. "Okay, got it." After hanging up, William suddenly realized he had never given Jenny anything before. An inexplicable irritability rose within him. He took one last look at the hospital room before heading in the opposite direction. The next day, Jenny was at home icing the red mark on her face when the doorbell rang. Opening the door, it was William holding a big bouquet of roses. Seeing her, he presented the roses and a jewelry box. Jenny frowned, not taking them. "What are you doing here?" William's face stiffened slightly. "I'm here to apologize." But hearing this, Jenny remained cold and indifferent, silent, and not accepting the flowers. It was his first time lowering himself to appease Jenny, yet she reacted this way. William instinctively wanted to get angry but holding back, saw the prominent swelling on her face, and his temper died down then. He exhaled slowly and said in a calm voice, "Jenny, I definitely went overboard this time, and it's normal for you to be mad." But despite him thinking he was being humble enough, Jenny just looked up at him coldly, showing no sign of calming down. William forced down the frustration in his chest and continued, "As for Gina, you've already made sure she can't dance anymore, so you should be less angry. Let's just call it even. After we get married, I won't have any contact with her. It'll be a clean break. Our family's engagement has been decided for ages, and making a fuss won't change anything." His words were both coaxing and threatening. Jenny's heart felt as distant as ice. She'd heard this before. In her last life, the first time she caught him with Gina, William said the same thing. Back then, she was naive enough to believe him, but it only ended in William cheating openly. Again and again Jenny looked at him indifferently, her eyes showing no emotion. "This is between you and Gina. It has nothing to do with me, so there's no need to include me. If there's nothing else, please leave my house." Seeing her clearly wanting to cut ties, William's heart sank heavily. Instinctively, he felt an urgent need to hold on to something. He grabbed Jenny, who was trying to walk away. "Jenny, please don't be mad at me like this. If you're worried, we can have the wedding now, okay?" A lump rose in her throat. Looking at the earnest face of William proposing, Jenny felt it was absurd. She couldn't fathom the kind of shamelessness it took to say those words. All the grievances and resentment from her past life flooded her heart. Jenny remained silent for a long time. Finally, she lifted her head and nodded, "All right." William was momentarily stunned by her agreement, but then he visibly relaxed. That afternoon at Jenny's request, William tweeted, "The wedding with my fiancée Jenny will be held on the 28th of this month. Everyone is welcome to attend." The union of the two families, which had already been a hot topic due to the broken engagement and the rumors about Jenny and Charles, was bound to attract attention. So as soon as William made the announcement, it quickly became a trending topic. Jenny browsed through the comments under the hashtag. It should have been a joyous occasion, but the comments were full of mockery toward her. Comment after comment was blatantly hostile. Jenny's gaze tightened. In her past life, when William and Gina were caught together, people laughed at her for not being able to keep her man. Now, they were calling her jealous and crazy. She let out a cold smile and tossed her phone aside. Meanwhile, at W Group's headquarters, in the president's office, the assistant stood quietly, not daring to say a word. William's computer screen had been stuck on the trending topic of the early wedding for quite a while. The air around him was so cold it could freeze. Just then, his phone buzzed. Opening the message discreetly, the assistant relaxed a bit and stepped forward. "William, Miss Jenny is here." You could see Charles visibly relax, reflexively closing the trending page, saying, "Let her in." The assistant left, and shortly after, Jenny came in. Seeing Charles, she got straight to the point. "Charles, does your offer to help still stand?" She still didn't use the family title to address him as uncle, just calling him by name. Charles swallowed a couple of times, speaking hoarsely, "For you, it's always valid." A week later, at William and Jenny's wedding. The event was grand and glamorous, not only inviting high-profile families but also opening media spots, with live streaming provided. Guests flocked in. William, in a white groom suit, stood at the entrance greeting guests, his handsome face filled with the joys of marriage. Suddenly, a driver who had gone to bring in the bride hurried over, visibly panicked. "William." The driver glanced at the nearby guests before leaning in to whisper, "Miss Jenny is gone. We couldn't find her." William's smile froze. Maintaining his composure, he quickly followed the driver backstage. He asked with a cold voice, "How could you not pick her up? She wasn't there when we arrived at the hotel." "What about her place? Have you checked?" "Checked. She's not there." "Send more people. Keep looking." William's face was a stormy shade of dark. After giving orders, he picked up his phone to call Jenny. The wedding was supposed to start soon, and the bride was nowhere in sight. A host cautiously approached to ask, As he listened to the ringing in his ear, William ordered coldly, "Delay it." As soon as those words left his mouth, a commotion erupted outside. A staff member rushed in. "William, Miss Jenny's on the live stream." "Where?" "On the wedding live feed screen." His eyebrows shot up, and William strode toward the front. Displayed on the giant wedding screen was Jenny, in a dazzling bridal gown. Every eye in the room turned toward the screen. Cameras flashed non-stop. Seeing her image on the screen, a wave of unprecedented panic swept over William. The phone at his ear finally connected. With a furrowed brow, William demanded sternly, "Jenny, what are you trying to do?" Jenny didn't respond on the call. Instead, right there on the screen, she held a pair of scissors, hacking away at her gown's hem. The beautiful dress was soon shredded in her hands. The room was collectively shocked into loud disbelief. Amidst the noise came Jenny's cold and decisive voice over the PA system. "William, after seeing you with Gina, why would you think I'd still marry you? Get this straight, this time, I'm done with you." Instantly, the whole room froze in stunned silence. William's face turned dark with anger, his voice heavy with frustration. "Jenny, didn't we agree to move past this?" The sound system at the wedding's big screen echoed with his voice simultaneously. As soon as he spoke, a wave of shock swept the entire venue. William's smug expression vanished instantly when he realized that Jenny was live streaming. His words at that moment basically confirmed everything Jenny had said earlier. Scowling, he quickly hung up the call and summoned someone to instruct them, "Turn off the wedding screen immediately. And find out where Jenny is." "Yes, we're on it right away." As the assistant left to carry out the order, Jenny appeared on the big screen, calmly staring at her phone lying face down on the table. Seeing the call had been disconnected, her expression remained unchanged. Slowly, she turned to the camera, gave a small smile, and started speaking. "I told everyone, J Group, William, and everyone else involved, that I didn't want this wedding, but nobody seemed to care about how I felt. Being part of J Group meant that my marriage and life were never mine to control. When I first announced the cancellation of our engagement, my account was swiftly taken down. My biological father even issued an apology statement on my behalf to preserve the marriage alliance. I've discussed ending the engagement with William multiple times, but was consistently ignored. He even went ahead with planning the wedding after cheating with Gina." Her tone was calm and straightforward, as if she were talking about someone else's story. Meanwhile, the media at the scene had already directed their cameras toward the big screen. The grand live-streamed wedding had turned into Jenny's broadcast stage, and related hashtags shot up in real-time, trending topics both online and offline. People buzzed in heated discussion. Meanwhile, William's family and Sam stood backstage, faces drained of color, utterly mortified. Sam's brows were furrowed tightly, while Maria, with eyes blazing with rage, snapped, "Sam, is this your wonderful daughter? What on earth is she doing? Is she trying to humiliate both our families completely? I have no idea what kind of madness she's suddenly gotten into." Sam's expression darkened even further. William glared at the screen, demanding harshly, "What's going on? Didn't I say to shut down the big screen? Why is it still live?" The accused staff member, head bowed, pointed towards the area controlling the screen, looking conflicted. "We can't get close. There's security guarding it, and they won't let us turn it off until the live stream ends." "What?" William's face turned a shade darker. Glancing over there, sure enough, he saw a line of bodyguards, dressed in black, vigilantly guarding the broadcasting equipment and power source, keeping everyone at bay. William took a deep breath and asked again, "Have we not found where Jenny is yet?" The assistant replied, "Still searching." As those words left his lips, Jenny's voice echoed from the big screen again. "I never knew my dignity was so insignificant in my father's eyes. I also had no idea that at some point, all of you came to think of me as the bully towards Gina. Here, I can honestly tell everyone, I have never wronged anyone. I have never aspired to marry into what you call a wealthy family. I just want to live a peaceful life, but even that simple wish can never be granted as long as I am part of J Group." Jenny paused momentarily, then looked at the camera again, her eyes clear and determined. So here, I declare, from this day forward, I am voluntarily leaving J Group. Everyone was stunned and taken aback, not expecting Jenny to drop another bombshell so soon. From now on, I sever all ties with Sam. Sam, I think you should be quite happy, right? Once I'm gone from J Group, you won't have to wait long to bring your illegitimate son back home, isn't that so? It's just a pity I couldn't bring your son greater benefits, for that I apologize. The revelation that the supposedly loyal and passionate Sam had a secret illegitimate son outside marriage sent the media buzzing with excitement. Today's wedding turned out to be quite a scoop. Sam's face turned an alternating shade of blue and white upon hearing this, the ever-image-conscious man wishing he could vanish into thin air. Scornful gazes focused on him, making it impossible to stay any longer. Sam, face set, quickly turned and left the wedding venue. Meanwhile, Jenny's broadcast seemed to be wrapping up. She gave a small smile and raised her voice. Although I am not there, I hope this wedding wasn't a complete waste for all the guests. With mountains and rivers separating us, may we never cross paths again. With those words, she raised her hand and pressed something on the screen. Instantly, the big screen went black, reverting to its original setting. Ironically enough, the scheduled wedding slideshow reappeared, featuring photos of a seemingly compatible William and Jenny, making the whole wedding all the more ridiculous. As the live stream ended, the bodyguards dispersed. William immediately ordered someone to shut off the screen's power. Now, they couldn't face the guests outside. William summoned the host, giving cold instructions: dismiss the guests. All right, yes, the host replied, somewhat reluctantly. A short while passed, and the overly lively wedding of the century quickly fell silent. William and his family remained where they were, unable to face the awaiting sea of reporters who were eager for a reaction. Meanwhile, Gina was still at home resting when she called. William, I saw the news. How's it going now? Her voice was soft, like she really cared about the wedding. William was just about to reply when Maria snatched the phone from him. Her voice turned cold. How dare you call William when you messed up the family marriage? Have some shame. Aunt, is there some misunderstanding? Gina was startled by Maria's sudden anger and quickly tried to show weakness. William furrowed his brows deeper, feeling irritated, and took back the phone. Mom, this is all Jenny's doing. Why blame Gina? You're still defending that vixen? Maria's eyes were icy. As a woman, she could clearly see Gina's intention. Think about it. Isn't every problem caused by her? Use your head for once and don't get played like a fool. William paused for a moment, deep in thought, and didn't try to grab the phone back again. Maria continued speaking into the phone. Gina, do you think you'll have a chance with William after Jenny's wedding fiasco? Dream on. As long as W Group is around, you won't ever enter our doors. Maria's words left Gina stunned. But her best trait was keeping her cool. She knew Maria's approval was important, but winning William's heart was crucial. So, she didn't react much to Maria's rant and instead softened her tone with a hint of grievance. I know, Aunt. I didn't expect anything. I just wanted to check on William. I'm sorry if I disturbed you. Hearing this, William felt a complex mix of emotions. Rubbing his brow, he spoke to Maria. All right, Mom, Gina said that. You can relax. Besides, I've never even thought about marrying her. The phone, on speaker, caught everything William said and sent it all to Gina's ears. Her expression froze, gripping her phone tighter, yet her demeanor remained gentle. I understand. I'm not worthy of William. Please, don't be upset with me, Aunt. Maria finally calmed down and handed the phone back to William. He turned off the speaker, not feeling like talking to Gina any longer. Gina, just rest up. Don't worry about things on my end. That's it. With that, he hung up. Turning around, he was about to leave the scene with his parents through a side exit when an assistant came in with news. William. We found Ms. Jenny. William's face changed instantly. He told the driver to take his parents home and then drove himself to the address the assistant gave him. It was in an unfinished building just 3 kilometers from the wedding venue. When he arrived and saw the familiar scene, memories flooded back, and he slammed on the brakes. This place was his and Jenny's secret spot during middle and high school. "William, I want to have my wedding here in the future." A young Jenny stood in the center, full of life, her voice bright and bold, leaning casually on a wooden board nearby. Young William, reading a comic, heard her. He tugged a corner of his mouth, replying, "Jenny, can't you think bigger?" "Why here?" Jenny huffed cutely, a blush on her cheeks. Then she whispered, "Well, what if we got married? Would you let me have it here?" The boy stopped turning his page for a moment, a hint of a smile in his eyes. "If it's with me, I wouldn't mind. As long as you're happy." A breeze carried off the teenagers' laughter while they exchanged silent glances, a secret understood without words. Those youthful memories suddenly stood so vividly in the present. William froze. He'd have never remembered this promise if he hadn't been back. He couldn't recall when he'd forgotten about this place, maybe when Gina came into the picture. And it was probably since then Jenny became so bothersome. Thinking about what Maria just said about Gina got him all frustrated again. He knew Gina liked him. But what guy doesn't enjoy some admiration? Though he felt a little flattered by Gina, he figured he'd always kept it in check, never crossing the line, except that night. Thinking about that night and the mess that followed, his mood shifted. He didn't want to linger in the past anymore. He pushed open the door and froze at the entrance. Entering, a stale, dusty smell came at him. William coughed a couple of times, covering his nose, and waved a hand to clear the air. Then he noticed wedding dress pieces scattered across the floor. On the table were Jenny's phone and a computer, her live streaming gear. The wedding dress was thrown carelessly on the ground, no longer beautiful. But the entire room was void of Jenny's presence. "Where is she?" William's voice was sharp, directed at his assistant. The assistant stood frozen, terrified after being yelled at, braved the boss's anger, and hesitantly picked up Jenny's phone. "Miss Jenny left her phone here. The best we can do is trace this location." William, his face tense, took the phone and asked again, "Can we find out where she went next?" The assistant shook his head. "Unless Miss Jenny uses her ID outside, it's hard to track her. There's no surveillance nearby to trace her movements after the live stream." Feeling disappointed, William had no choice but to head home. Back at his place, he ignored the chaotic wedding comments awaiting him, but saw that the living room was filled with W Group folks. And right there in the center was his young but influential uncle, Charles. William forced a stern demeanor, moving forward to promise, "Uncle, I'll find Jenny to solve this situation." But Charles simply raised an eyebrow, his eyes calm and his thin lips parting. "I came here to suggest you stop looking for Jenny." "What?" William was momentarily stunned. Alan and Maria glanced at each other, also confused. Alan couldn't help but ask, "Charles, what do you mean by that? Jenny made such a scene today, embarrassing W Group. How can you say not to find her?" As those words fell, Charles's face suddenly turned cold. Although Alan felt justified, he inexplicably averted his gaze, internally unsettled. Charles, his expression indifferent, said, "Why tie your personal matters to W Group?" Hearing this, Alan's face stiffened slightly, and he fell silent. William frowned deeply, still a bit unwilling. "Uncle, but today, clearly, it was Jenny who—" "I don't feel like saying this again," Charles interrupted, showing a hint of impatience. "Let's stop here. Public opinion will die down quickly if left alone. If you keep chasing this, aren't you just embarrassing yourself with things you've done?" After those words, there was silence all around. No one dared say another word. After a long pause, William collected himself and nodded. "Okay, I understand." Having received a response, Charles didn't linger and left directly. As his figure vanished from view, William still couldn't withdraw his gaze. William couldn't comprehend why Charles, who normally didn't involve himself, would come over just to say this. A hint of suspicion gradually rose in his eyes. Suddenly, William remembered the incident from a while back. When he visited the hospital, Charles had mentioned Jenny had hitched a ride back to City A with him. William never doubted it because he assumed Charles wouldn't be interested in Jenny given his status. But now... William, since your uncle has spoken, you should know to let it be, Alan advised, always following the head of W group. William, however, disagreed inwardly, but outwardly nodded in agreement with Alan. Returning to his room, William pulled up that news piece with photos of Jenny and Charles. His eyes turned red as his fingers clenched into fists. The photo revealed a genuine concern in Jenny's expression towards Charles, without any hiding that genuine concern she used to only show to him. When did she change so drastically, with all those passionate feelings towards him simply vanishing? Unwillingness surged within William. He stared at the photo for a long time, then made a call: keep tracking Jenny's whereabouts and notify me as soon as you find her. Okay. And don't let anyone know I'm still looking, especially my uncle. I got it. 3 months later, William received news from his team. William, we found Miss Jenny's current place. A coastal village, with sunshine filtering through clouds over a blue ocean and fresh air. The locals lived by a routine, fishing by day and resting by night. This was Jenny's dream of a laid-back, slow-paced life. At 9 a.m., Jenny rode her newly bought electric scooter, heading for school. Along the way, many friendly neighbors greeted her. Jenny. Off to work? Stopping her scooter, Jenny nodded. Yeah, finishing up early today? Her neighbor, a warm-hearted lady making a living selling handmade crafts at the tourist town's market, usually packed up around noon, returning at 9 was unusual, making Jenny curious. A visitor from afar bought everything, the neighbor chuckled happily. That's great. Seems like good luck today, Jenny smiled. Her neighbor chuckled, waving, thanks for the kind words. Chatting away, Jenny almost lost track of time. Checking her watch, she hurriedly cranked her scooter back to life. Gotta go, I'm running late for school. Alright, go on to work. With those words, Jenny quickly rode off. Jenny ran a dance school, teaching kids. While in the middle of a lesson, her neighbor suddenly arrived, looking worried. Jenny. You need to hide. There's a group from out of town asking everywhere about you. A beat skipped in Jenny's heart, her expression darkening. Well, what's bound to come will come. She had prepared herself mentally, realizing exactly how persistent William could be even with Charles intervening. William would likely search for her privately. Remaining composed, Jenny gave her neighbor a calm smile. It's fine, I haven't done anything wrong. Why should I hide? Are you sure? The neighbor was still concerned. The neighbor I've known for just half a month feels more like family than my own biological one ever did. Jenny didn't quite know whether to laugh or cry about that. Hesitating for a moment, her gaze fell on the lively, adorable kids in the dance studio. She wasn't worried about herself, she could face William head-on. But if those people sent by William were reckless and hurt these kids, things would get ugly. With that thought, Jenny clapped her hands to get the attention of the kids warming up. Hey, little ones. I've got something I need to do today, so no class, okay? Go change back into your clothes, and I'll call your parents to pick you up. The kids erupted in cheers, totally thrilled about the unexpected day off to them. No classes meant pure happiness. Seeing their obvious joy, Jenny smiled fondly and grabbed her phone to inform the parents. While she was doing that, an older woman was worried sick. Jenny, I'm not kidding, those people don't look like they're up to any good, she fretted. You really need to be careful. I've already told the neighbors not to give you away. I'll find a few more folks to help out. With that, she rushed off, reminding Jenny to stay safe. Jenny felt a wave of warmth wash over her and glanced down at her phone. Her brow furrowed as she checked her messages. In the parents' group chat, some weren't happy about class being cancelled. But after Jenny offered a free week of classes to make up for it, nobody complained anymore. Soon enough, parents trickled in to pick up their kids after an hour. Only one 10-year-old girl was left. Jenny, my dad probably hasn't checked his phone again, she said, slinging on her backpack. Can I go home by myself? The girl, known as Coco, came from a single-parent family. Her dad had never shown up. Coco was always the last to leave, and though she assured Jenny she knew the area well and wouldn't get lost, Jenny was never at ease until she saw Coco safely home. Even though it was still early, Jenny wasn't comfortable letting Coco walk home alone. "No way, Coco," she said with a warm smile. "I'll take you home." Jenny locked up the dance studio and hopped on her electric scooter, with Coco sitting quietly in front. Jenny rode smoothly with the breeze in her face, feeling relaxed. "Jenny. You're so nice to me." Coco's sweet, childish voice rang out. Jenny chuckled, her voice gentle. "Of course. Coco is adorable, so of course, you deserve it." "Really?" Coco's wide, dark eyes looked back at Jenny. Jenny nodded absolutely. "Then why doesn't my mom want me?" Coco's gaze dropped, looking sad. The child's disappointment was so apparent, Jenny was momentarily at a loss for words. But then Coco asked, "Jenny, can you be my mom?" Jenny nearly stopped the scooter, shaking her head with a wry smile. "I can't, Coco. Being a mom isn't something just anyone can do. It takes someone your dad loves, someone who'll take care of you." It wasn't clear if Coco understood. But she seemed to ponder Jenny's words and nodded emphatically. "I get it now." Though Jenny had no clue what Coco thought she'd figured out, she just laughed it off, her mind still on the challenges she'd face once she got home. Just then, a private car suddenly appeared ahead, forcing Jenny to a stop. A tall figure stepped out, standing before her. Jenny, finally. Jenny's heart skipped. The man wasn't anyone else but Charles. The tension that had been building inside her suddenly eased. She exhaled deeply. "It's you?" Charles's brow relaxed, a small smile playing on his lips. "Why, aren't you happy to see me?" "Of course not," Jenny replied with a wry smile, quickly explaining, "I just didn't expect it'd be you. You could have let me know you were coming." Charles picked up on the hint in her voice, the cheer fading slightly from his eyes. "Someone's looking for you?" he asked, his tone serious. Jenny blinked, caught off guard by his attitude. The earlier tension crept back in. "You're not here to find me?" "I just got here," Charles replied earnestly. "I know where you live, no need to ask around." Her face darkening, Jenny thought, if Charles wasn't the one looking for her, then who was it? Just then, Coco, seated on the scooter, peeked her head out. Looking at Charles, she innocently asked, "Jenny, is that your boyfriend?" Jenny and Charles both froze at the child's innocent question. Charles's eyes twinkled as he looked at Jenny, waiting for her response. Suppressing a mix of feelings, Jenny softly denied, "No, Coco, you mustn't say things like that." Charles didn't say a word, just watched quietly, but Coco's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Awesome. Jenny, you should consider my dad as your boyfriend." Jenny lightly tapped the little one's head. "What nonsense, you little rascal." Coco just stuck her tongue out and didn't say anything else. No one noticed, but Charles had a glint of something in his eyes. "Uncle, I need to take her home first. Can you wait for me for a bit?" Jenny asked. Charles leaned against the car, nodding indifferently, "Of course." Jenny didn't say much more to Charles and rode the little scooter to Coco's house. When they arrived at the door, just like always, there was nobody inside. Jenny told Coco to be careful, then took a deep look at her empty home and thought to herself, who knows what kind of carefree person Coco's dad is, always nowhere to be found, and yet okay with leaving a 10-year-old girl home alone. Luckily, Coco's neighbors are all kind-hearted ladies. They see Jenny bringing her back every day and always come out to chat. "Jenny, you're bringing Coco back again today? Thanks a bunch. We'll keep an eye on this little one." "All right." Jenny smiled, finishing today's handoff. She then turned her scooter around and headed home. Jenny wasn't riding that fast, keeping it steady. But turning a corner, a man covered in mud suddenly appeared. She had to hit the brakes hard and almost toppled over. The man quickly grabbed the handlebars to steady her. "Looking so delicate, riding so fiercely, rushing to your doom?" The man was tall, with a cigarette between his lips and a scruffy stubble that hadn't been trimmed for days. His eyes had a roguish look. Even with a pretty decent-looking face, he somehow looked like, well, a thug. Jenny wasn't impressed. Unkempt and rude. "Sir, you popped out and ran into me first." Jenny couldn't help but retort. The man squinted at her, taking the cigarette out of his mouth, tapping off the ash, and said carelessly, "So you're saying I owe you an apology?" Jenny frowned, displeased. "I didn't say that. There was no damage to the bike. She just couldn't stand the guy acting like the victim." As they bickered, another person appeared at the alley corner, quickly approaching to grab Jenny's hand. "Jenny. You just got here and already picking up guys?" That familiar voice, that disgusting tone. It was William. Jenny's eyes darkened, trying to pull her hand away. But William had a firm grip, not giving her a chance to shake him off. Jenny's face turned cold. "Let go. William, we have nothing to do with each other anymore. If you don't release me, I'll call the police." "How can that be?" "We're about to get married," William said with coldness in his eyes, sneering at the guy standing next to Jenny. "What, you're not leaving?" The man had just been watching, but when William turned his anger on him, he raised an eyebrow, stepped forward, and pulled out a badge to show it. "Sorry, I can't leave. Mike, captain of the coastal squad. I suspect you're intending harm to this lady, so please let go." The moment he showed his badge, both Jenny and William were stunned. Jenny was surprised that the scruffy guy who looked like a street thug was actually a cop. And William frowned, glaring coldly at Jenny before finally letting go. Mike glanced between them and settled his eyes on Jenny. "Miss, who mentioned calling the police? Do you need my help?" Jenny paused, then looked at William before shaking her head. "No, it's fine." Hearing her answer, Mike wasn't surprised. He smiled, nodded, gave them a knowing look, and then coolly walked away with the cigarette between his lips. The area grew quiet again after Mike left. Jenny looked coldly at William. "What do you want from me? What do you think? You've made me search high and low for you." William sneered, grabbing her chin to make her look up. "You embarrassed me at the wedding, ruining the merger between our families. Do you think you can just stay here peacefully?" Pain shot through her chin. Jenny furrowed her brows tightly, lifting her hand to break his hold. "I just stated facts, and regarding the family merger, I've already left J Group. My blood-related father can go to Gina if he wants. Isn't that what you want too?" Hearing this, William's face fell for a moment. "What are you rambling about?" Jenny's expression turned serious, letting out a cold laugh. "You know whether I'm rambling or not. You never liked me, so why pretend it's me or nothing?" At these words, William's eyes flickered slightly. He stared at her for a moment. "Is that what you think of me? Who do you think I like? Isn't it Gina?" Jenny looked at him with heavy eyes, answering without hesitation when that name came out. William was momentarily taken aback. Then his expression softened, feeling a strange relief and joy in his heart. Could it be she was indeed jealous of Gina, which led her to act that way at the wedding? 3 months had passed, and the buzz about that wedding was fading online. While the inner circle still gossiped about it, W Group's position ensured no one dared mention it in their presence. As for the relationship with J Group, Jenny's disappearance had stalled it, and W Group cancelled their projects with J Group. In a way, for the outside world and others, the issue had long been over. But William refused to let it go. He initially thought that when he saw Jenny, he'd be filled with resentment and anger. But the moment he actually saw her, he felt more relieved than anything else. "Jenny, let's have a talk." William took a deep breath to calm down and spoke softly. Jenny let out a sarcastic laugh. "I don't think there's anything left for us to talk about." With that, she turned the car around and was about to speed off. But the next thing William said made her stop abruptly. Jenny stumbled a bit, her face turning serious as she looked back at him. "What did you say?" William just stood calmly behind her and repeated what he had just said. "Your father is remarrying and planning a grand cruise event to introduce his illegitimate son." Everything was almost exactly like the past. However, in the last life, Sam brought back the illegitimate son and held this grand event only after Jenny had divorced and was kicked out of W Group. She had underestimated Sam's audacity. Just at the wedding, she had exposed his two-faced nature, yet now he's not even bothering to hide it. Jenny's expression turned heavier, but after a moment of surprise, she showed little emotion. She chuckled lightly, "Is that so? Well, then I wish him well. It has nothing to do with me anymore. Are you really okay with just handing over such a massive inheritance?" William had a hint of disbelief in his eyes, as if he couldn't comprehend how she could be so calm. Jenny remained calm and composed. "From the moment I publicly left J Group, whoever he hands the inheritance to is none of my business. What's there for me to be upset about? But J Group was clearly supposed to be yours." William's eyes flashed coldly, as if he was feeling indignant for her. Seeing this side of William, Jenny was momentarily stunned. She suddenly remembered hearing some past rumors about W Group. It was said William's father was actually taken in by W Group, and Charles was the only true heir. So back when W Group was choosing an heir, no one thought of giving it to William's father. Even though William's father was Charles's older brother, he never dared speak harshly to Charles and was always respectful, not at all like an older brother in the past. It wasn't until something happened to Charles. With no one left to inherit, the burden fell on William. But now, with Charles alive and well, William clearly had no chance of rising to power. As long as Charles was around, William had to keep his ambitions in check. Realizing this, a chill rose in Jenny's heart. "Don't bother worrying about me," she said coolly, "I have my own choices. Your choice is to stay in this rundown town as a dance teacher earning $3,000 a month?" William scoffed, "If you come back with me, I can speak on your behalf to my parents, overlook your wedding stunt, and even help you fight for J Group's inheritance." "Help me?" Jenny found it amusing and couldn't help but question, "Isn't it actually you coveting J Group's assets, wanting to get them for yourself? You'd probably sweet-talk me into transferring all my shares to you, wouldn't you?" Hearing this, William's face stiffened. He seemed surprised at how she had suddenly gotten so clever but still awkwardly denied it. "Why would you think that? I'm not that kind of person." Listening to him trying to cover for himself, Jenny chuckled coldly. In the previous life, he had done just that. "I just want to live my own life well, that's it." With that, Jenny took off on her bike. William stood there for a long time, his hands clenching into fists at his side, eyes locked onto her fading figure. Until just before she disappeared from view, he made a decision. He determinedly got in his car and drove toward where he'd just discovered Jenny's address. It had taken him 3 whole months to find Jenny, and he didn't plan to leave so easily now. Even if it meant dragging her, he was going to bring her back. But when he saw the person waiting at her door before her house, William abruptly stopped his car from a distance. His knuckles turned white on the steering wheel, as he fixated intensely on the familiar figure in front. He watched Jenny welcome the person inside with a smile. Rage built up within William's eyes as he violently slammed the wheel with his hand. If he hadn't seen wrong, that was Charles. Those two were definitely involved with each other. The sharp sound of a car horn invaded the yard. Jenny frowned slightly, mumbling, "This area is a no-honking zone. Who'd be driving around honking like that?" Saying that, she passed the cup of hot tea she was holding to Charles, who was seated on the wooden sofa in the living room. Charles paused momentarily with the tea. "Thank you." After a moment's thought, he said, "Actually, I'm not much older than you." The implication was, there was no need to call him uncle. Realizing this, Jenny was taken aback, and her ears heated up unexpectedly, but when she looked again, Charles was nonchalantly sipping his tea. Her heart quickened for a few seconds. Was it possible she misunderstood this time too? But soon, Charles changed the topic. "Are you adjusting well here?" Over these 3 months, Jenny hadn't really kept in contact with Charles. From leaving the wedding to settling here, it was all her own doing. She only asked Charles to ensure that the wedding's live broadcast ran smoothly and to persuade William not to come after her. Beyond that, there was nothing. Even settling here was something she only told Charles about when he inquired last month. So this was actually Jenny and Charles's first meeting in 3 months. Their conversation was nothing more than typical small talk between friends. Jenny smiled warmly. "It's going okay. I really enjoy this relaxed pace of life. That's good. Seeing her so at ease, Charles found himself smiling as well. They chatted for a bit more. Jenny learned that Charles was just passing through on a business trip and decided to drop by, which helped clear up any romantic notions she might have had. As the sun set, everything was bathed in a golden light. Jenny's open balcony was the perfect spot to watch the sunset. The sea and the sun reflected beautifully off each other, and the waves glimmered gold. It was stunning. During this beautiful sunset, Charles put down his cup and said goodbye. It's getting late. I should head out. Oh, by the way, I heard you had someone looking for you. I've arranged everything, so you can stay here without worries. Don't stress about William, I'll handle it when I get back. Charles didn't know Jenny had already met William. He simply gave her his reassurance. Jenny didn't want to trouble him, so she just nodded. No need to go to such lengths. I can handle it myself. Charles looked at her with a soft smile. It's no trouble at all. Don't worry about it. With that, he left. His car quickly drove away. In the following days, Jenny decided to temporarily close the dance studio for a few days, even though Charles assured her he would help. She didn't want to owe him a favor. Also, knowing William's persistence, he likely wouldn't give up easily, even if he was keeping things from Charles. After a few nerve-wracking days, William had disappeared without a trace. Jenny furrowed her brows. Was she overthinking it? But she quickly dismissed that idea. William was not one to give up without achieving his goals. A week passed, and Jenny couldn't delay reopening the dance studio any longer, so she did. But one day after coming home from work, she opened her door to find a big man in a black hat inside. Her heart skipped a beat, and she turned to flee. The next second, the man chopped at her neck, and everything went black. When she came to, Jenny realized she wasn't in that village anymore. She looked out the window and was shocked to recognize the cityscape. She was back in City A. The room was securely locked, but they hadn't taken any precautions against her. Her phone and belongings were on a nearby table. Excited, Jenny crawled over to grab her phone. Her neck still throbbed with pain, but she pushed through, trying to escape, only to find herself weak and unable to muster strength. She had clearly been drugged. Ignoring this, she reached for the phone and realized it only had 1% battery left. Panicking, Jenny pressed the side button 3 times. It was an emergency contact Charles insisted she set up before he left. She never thought she'd need it, let alone so soon. But before she could confirm if the alert was sent, the room door swung open. Jenny's heart leapt, and she dropped the phone. It clattered loudly against the floor. Standing before her were strangers. One was the burly man from before, and the other a middle-aged woman. Jenny shot a glance up. Who are you? Mom, help her change clothes. The man ignored her, tossing a strapless dress at her. Jenny pulled back, bristling but unafraid. I asked who you are. You know this is kidnapping, right? They exchanged looks. The man leaned against the door, uninterested in speaking. The woman explained, Miss Jenny, don't blame us. We're just following orders. Whose orders? This is illegal. Jenny shouted, demanding, let me out. Shut up. The man lost patience, barking at her. We mean no harm, just taking you somewhere. But keep making noise, and I can't promise your safety. His scarred face looked menacing. Jenny considered her options and fell silent. Seeing she wouldn't struggle, he left, and the woman brought the dress over. Jenny was changed into the elegant gown and blindfolded in a car. Half an hour later, they stopped, and some of her weakness subsided. She was helped out but had to behave without any sudden moves. Where are you taking me? Jenny softly asked. The man glared, you'll find out soon enough. They shoved her into an underground parking elevator and left. Jenny felt weak, sinking to the floor. They hadn't entered the elevator, only pressed the button for the 5th floor. As the elevator door shut, Jenny was filled with dread. She had no idea what awaited her when it opened. Judging from the floors, the building was only 7 stories high, maybe a mall? The elevator ascended swiftly. With a ding, the doors suddenly opened. As Jenny saw the outside, her eyes widened in shock. This was Sam's yacht party, organized to promote his illegitimate son. Those weren't mall floors but yacht decks. As the drugs hold lessened, Jenny stood and stepped out. All 7 floors of this luxury yacht were lit up in the darkness, filled with glitz and glamour. She found herself in the heart of the main banquet hall on the 5th deck. When she first stepped out, everyone was caught up in their own thing. But after Jenny had taken a couple of steps, someone quickly spotted her. "Isn't that Jenny?" Someone exclaimed with an excited gleam in their eyes. They rushed to pull their friend over to block Jenny's path. "Jenny, what are you doing here? Are you here to crash the party?" The gossip was obvious in their expressions. This event had been the source of entertainment for the influential families of City A. Everyone knew that at that wedding, Jenny exposed Sam's true colors, making him hide at home for over half a month, too embarrassed to show his face. Who would have thought he'd come around, eventually? He started showing his thick skin around again, announcing he'd remarry. He even claimed his new partner had a son that he'd treat as his own and was planning to hand over J Group's inheritance to him. People talked, but everyone knew. The so-called son wasn't brought into the family by anyone. It was obviously the mistress and the illegitimate son trying to legitimize their status. Being a wealthy and esteemed family, J Group had a solid foundation. No one dared to publicly disgrace him. Everyone at this cruise party had a mutual understanding. They thought they'd get through this event uneventfully, never expecting Jenny to make an appearance here. That was like throwing a stone into calm waters. Everyone in the room immediately smelled drama. The disappearance of Jenny for 3 months, then appearing like this. There was bound to be a show. Their curiosity was barely hidden. Jenny's expression darkened. Frowning, she ignored them and turned to leave, holding her dress as she walked out. Whatever the intentions of the person who brought her here, she wasn't going to play along. But as she hurried away, she found herself at the exit of the banquet hall, staring at the already launched yacht, and froze. The sea breeze whipped her hair around. Looking out, all she could see was endless black sea. The loud sound of waves interrupted her thoughts. The cold wind was icy, biting into her shoulders. Standing on the deck, she clung tightly to the railing. The next moment, she felt someone drape a coat over her shoulders. Startled, Jenny turned to find herself looking into William's amused eyes. "Why so scared seeing me?" William asked with a slight smirk. Jenny stepped back, threw his coat back at him, and her expression cooled. "So it was you." The coat fell to the ground. William wasn't fazed, smiling coldly as he moved closer. "And what if it was? I'm helping you take back what's yours." "But I told you I don't need it." Jenny's heart chilled, stepping back again. Waves crashed, the boat rocked, spraying cold water that splashed on Jenny's face. Her heart trembled as she tightened her grip on the railing. Seeing this, William chuckled. "Come on, you're seasick and afraid of heights. Why torture yourself?" "I want off this boat," Jenny said, gritting her teeth, unmoving. William casually rested his hand on the railing. "When I get J Group's inheritance for you, I'll let you off the boat." This man was unbelievable. Jenny glared at him. "What if I refuse?" The wind howled around them. The deck was slick with wetness. Cold seawater soaked Jenny's dress hem. William gazed at her with a smirk. "Unless you jump overboard, you're not going anywhere." He looked certain, confident, with a mocking smile. He thought Jenny knew she didn't have much choice. But as they locked eyes, William faltered, a thread of panic weaving through him. "Jenny, you're not thinking," he began. But before he could finish, Jenny was already climbing over the railing without hesitation. "Jenny!" William panicked, stepping forward. But for every step he took, Jenny leaned further out. "If you think driving me to death will satisfy you, I'll jump right now." She was calm, but her words were firm. To her, it seemed, even death was not fearsome. William's heart jolted, not believing Jenny would actually go this far. "You should come down," he urged. But Jenny didn't move, glaring coldly at him. "Get me off this boat." She was determined to sever ties with J Group. William said nothing more, nodding, "Fine." In the end, Jenny climbed down from the railing. William led her into a room, his eyes dark as he looked at her, wanting to say something, but all that came out was, "Rest here. Once we're back at port, I'll get you home." The yacht was indeed not convenient for disembarking in the middle. Jenny said nothing further, only, "I need to change clothes." "Sure." William didn't deny her request, quickly fetching casual clothes for her. Jenny took the clothes, about to change. When suddenly, the door to the room burst open and a familiar soft, lively voice filled the air. "William. Why are you?" Gina's words cut off when she spotted Jenny in the room. Her face stiffened, yet she tried to maintain a friendly demeanor. "Jenny? Why are you here? Are you going to reconcile with Dad?" Hearing this, Jenny found it amusing. She, Sam's biological daughter, was eager to sever ties. Yet Gina, the adopted daughter, called him Dad so easily before, something like this might have bothered her. But now, she realized she felt nothing about the title. Jenny shot her a brief glance. "Relax, I'm not here to fight over being J Group's heiress. You can pretend I'm invisible." Called out so straight, Gina's discomfort was evident. She hadn't seen William in a long time over the past 3 months. Every time she tried to meet up, he'd brush her off, saying he was busy. Later, she learned he was still pursuing Jenny all along. And now, he even brought her to the cruise party. Gina hid all her emotions and gave a soft smile. "Do you have some misunderstanding about me? I didn't mean anything by it. If you're here, I'm sure my dad is the happiest one." "Happiest?" Jenny let out a cold laugh, looking straight ahead. "Don't play dumb too much. I have nothing to do with the J Group now. Do you really think my being here would make him happy?" Maybe Gina didn't expect Jenny to be so direct. Gina's face went pale for a moment, her smile frozen, unsure of what to say. Luckily, William stepped in. "Jenny, there's no need to take it out on Gina. Leave it at that." Whenever something involved Gina, William was always there to protect her. Jenny had gotten used to his actions, so she wasn't surprised at all. William then led Gina out of the room, closing the door behind them. William gave Gina a slightly cold look. "Why are you here?" "I came to see why you hadn't gone to the ballroom yet," Gina feigned casually. William coldly regarded her. "There's no need to rush me about that. Gina, I know you probably came here because you overheard someone in the ballroom saying Jenny had arrived." A hint of panic washed over Gina's face as she grabbed his hand. True, she came because of that, but she didn't expect William to see right through her. William impatiently pulled his hand away and softly warned her, "Just play nice and finish this event. Don't stir up any trouble, understand?" Gina bit her lip and nodded. After a while, the two walked side by side toward the ballroom. In the lounge, Jenny struggled to pull down the zipper on her dress. Thanks to the lingering effects of being drugged before being brought there, she had just enough strength to walk but still found it hard to do anything more exerting. And this dress was designed to be tricky to take off. It took a lot of effort, but Jenny finally managed to undo the zipper. Just as she slipped the dress off, the door creaked open. "I'm still changing. What are you doing here?" Thinking it was William, Jenny hastily grabbed the dress to cover herself and turned around. But the person standing there was Charles. "Sorry." Charles quickly shut the door, stepping out immediately. The anger and panic in his eyes vanished in an instant, and he sighed with relief. Thankfully, she was okay. He had just seen Jenny's distress message. When he tried to call back, it couldn't be connected, but he was already on the cruise. Charles had been considering taking a speedboat to get off the cruise and find her. But when he heard people in the ballroom say Jenny was on board, he realized the best chance was that William was behind everything, so he came straight here looking for her. He didn't expect that coming with a mind to interrogate, he'd open the door to find Jenny changing. Not long after, he heard Jenny call out, "I'm done, you can come in now." Charles reopened the door. The person inside had changed out of the fancy dress into casual light-colored clothes. Their eyes met, and neither spoke. Jenny looked a bit embarrassed, cleared her throat to ease the awkwardness, and spoke first. "Why did you come looking for William? Why are you at William's place?" Surprisingly, Charles spoke at the same time. Both paused for a moment after they realized. Jenny quickly explained everything that had just happened to Charles. Charles's brows furrowed tightly. William was getting bolder indeed. The deep anger in his eyes was hidden entirely as he looked at Jenny, and he gently said, "I'll take you off the ship." Hearing this, Jenny paused for a moment. "Off the ship? But William told me to wait for the cruise to dock." "Not with me." Charles's reply was firm. He lowered his head to make a phone call, gave a few instructions, and got a response. "Okay, William, a private speedboat will be there to pick you up in about 10 minutes. After hanging up the call. "Are you hungry? Want to get something to eat first?" Charles asked her warmly. Jenny intended to say no, but her stomach grumbled in protest. Charles understood and smiled, opening the door, leading her to the dining room ahead. Initially, Jenny feared running into acquaintances in the dining room, worried about another round of awkwardness like before, but Charles had set everything up thoughtfully. By the time they arrived, except for the chef and waitstaff, there were no guests at Alley don't like being disturbed while dining, so there's often a private dining room for situations like this. Charles explained, easing Jenny's tension. They sat across from each other. Soon, multiple dishes were served. Coincidentally or not, every dish just happened to suit Jenny's taste perfectly. Seeing Jenny enjoy her meal, Charles merely gave a subtle smile. "Glad you like it." The room was warm. Charles's suit jacket was draped on his chair's back, his shirt sleeves rolled up to his forearms. His movements with the knife and fork were elegant and composed. Unintentionally, Jenny's gaze wandered to a scar on his right forearm. Suddenly remembering something, her eyes widened. "The scar on your arm?" Hearing this, Charles thought he must have startled her. He quickly lowered his sleeve, a shadow of apology on his face. "Sorry, did that scare you?" Realizing what he meant, Jenny quickly shook her head and explained, "No, don't get me wrong, I just thought you looked familiar when I was really little. I got lost once, and it was a big brother with a scar on his arm who brought me back. But I was too young, and after I came home, I got sick. When I woke up, I couldn't remember what the big brother looked like, just that scar." Opposite her, Charles paused after she said this. A moment later, a faint smile appeared in his eyes. "So, you do remember me?" All of a sudden, it hit her like a ton of bricks. Jenny was stunned into silence. She almost couldn't believe her ears. What did he just say? Charles leaned back in his chair, watching her with amusement in his eyes. "Back then, you kept asking me for lollipops. You said you had a cavity, so your family wouldn't let you have more." In that moment, all her doubts vanished. She couldn't recall the details, but back then she did have a rotten tooth. Her nanny never let her eat sweets, and she had craved them for quite a while growing up. When she tried to remember things before she was 5, besides that scar, all she could recall was her longing for candy. "Did we really meet so early?" Jenny was surprised. "I thought we first met at William's birthday party." Hearing William's name softened the smile in Charles's eyes a bit, and he didn't elaborate. Actually, they had another encounter before that. It was when Charles had just started college, and Jenny was starting high school. He was visiting the school to handle William's enrollment paperwork. It was hot, and the sound of cicadas filled the air. Charles had just rushed over after a college sports event, and the heat combined with the exertion made him, usually extremely healthy, succumb to heatstroke. Finding himself isolated in the shade of a tree without anyone around, he fell dizzy and collapsed to the ground. That was when Jenny appeared. Wearing a ponytail and sports uniform, she rushed over to him with worry in her eyes. "Are you okay? What happened?" Her soft, sweet voice overlapped with a childhood memory. Before Charles could even react, everything went black, and he lost consciousness. When he opened his eyes again, he was in the infirmary. Turning his head, he saw Jenny fanning him with a face full of sweat. Seeing him awake, she relaxed a bit and said, "You're awake. How are you feeling?" At that moment, it was as if all the heat dissipated. The refreshing breeze cleared his mind. He shook his head. "I'm okay." "Great. Then I'll head out." Jenny didn't leave her name. She grabbed her backpack and was gone in no time. Later, they met at William's 17th birthday party. That was when Jenny remembered meeting him for the first time. On that day, the moment Charles saw her, he recognized her immediately. But as he was about to go up to her, she rushed over to William. Then she came over with William and called him uncle. Following William's lead, those two words suddenly put Charles on a pedestal, higher than hers. He had no reason to become friends with her. So he watched her progress from being William's childhood friend to having a crush on him, and then finally becoming William's fiancée. Her entire teenage years and affection revolved around William. To her, he was just William's uncle and could only ever be that. Charles had never planned to tell Jenny about those hidden feelings. He thought if Jenny really wanted to marry William, he could turn a blind eye to William's obvious ambition. But Charles never expected that one day Jenny would suddenly want to break off the engagement with William. Never expected that Jenny would suddenly rush in to save him. Maybe people are just never satisfied. When he started getting closer to her, he began to hope for more. If she truly didn't love William, could he possibly take a brave step forward? Charles lowered his eyes, hiding those thoughts behind his dark pupils. "I guess you've saved me twice now." Jenny chuckled, eyes crescent-shaped, and said to him. Charles smirked, "And you've saved me twice, so we're even." Hearing this, Jenny paused, a bit puzzled. If that car accident counted as saving him once, when was the other time? But before she could ask again, there was a sudden commotion outside. Something happened. A piercing scream came through the door. Charles's face darkened, and he called his assistant over. "Go see what's happening outside." "Okay." In less than 10 minutes, the assistant returned, looking severe. "I heard there's a crazed fan of Gina here on the ship with a knife, attacking people and demanding to see her." Hearing this, Jenny's eyes became serious. This was something that didn't happen in the previous timeline. What's going on? Regardless, now wasn't the time to get involved. Charles clearly shared her thoughts, his demeanor serious as he asked, "Is the speedboat I had prepared ready?" "It just arrived, we can board," the assistant replied quietly. Charles looked at Jenny. "We can go now." The private dining area had a separate walkway. Amidst the chaos outside, Charles led Jenny down to the lower deck to board the speedboat. But as they reached the boarding area, they saw Gina, her makeup running and full of fear, huddled at the exit. She visibly relaxed when she realized they weren't the dangerous fan and rushed over to Jenny. "Is that speedboat downstairs for you? Can I come with you?" Jenny pursed her lips but said nothing. The assistant standing nearby spoke up, "This private speedboat has only 2 seats, meant for William and Miss Jenny. If you get on, who do you want to get off?" Gina was caught off guard, tears streaming down her face, and without thinking, she fell to her knees. "I beg you, please let me go. If that lunatic sees me here, I'm done for." Just as she said that, there was a commotion not far away. Among the noises was a man's frenzied shout, "Gina? Show yourself." Hearing the voice, Gina immediately grabbed Jenny's hand, filled with fear, tears brimming. "Please save me." Every time the man outside slammed the wall, Gina flinched in fear. Her look of panic didn't seem fake at all. Seeing the hesitation in Jenny's eyes, Charles spoke softly, "Let's just let you guys leave now." Gina's eyes lit up with joy as she quickly thanked Charles, "Thank you." Jenny looked at Charles, concern etched on her face. "What about you?" "Don't worry," Charles's eyes held a hint of joy due to her concern. "You don't need to worry about me, the yacht is already near the shore. Just wait for me there." A bit of Jenny's worry dissipated, and she nodded firmly, "Okay, but be careful." She then got on the speedboat with Gina. The boat sped across the sea, leaving a trail of white wake behind. Up front was the pilot, focused on steering with noise-canceling headphones on due to the loud engine. Jenny and Gina were seated at the back. They had boarded the speedboat in such a hurry that their life jackets weren't properly worn. Jenny had no intention of talking to Gina. Letting her leave the yacht was already the biggest compromise she was willing to make. But as she was adjusting her life jacket, Gina suddenly leaned closer. "Thanks a lot," Gina said with a smile. However, her tone was completely different from how she'd been on the yacht, and all the fear in her eyes vanished instantly. Jenny, being all too familiar with Gina, seemed to realize something. Her pupils shrunk as she reached forward to the driver for help. As soon as she opened her mouth, Gina quickly covered her mouth with a handkerchief, pulling her back. Gina whispered in her ear, sounding sinister and resentful, "Jenny, you have no idea how much I've envied everything you have over the years. Now, it's finally all going to be mine. Why did you have to show up?" She held Jenny's mouth tight. Jenny struggled, but soon felt weak and sleepy. There was something on Gina's handkerchief. As the speedboat turned, Gina took advantage, viciousness in her eyes, and shoved Jenny overboard. "Go to hell. What are you doing?" The pilot at the front turned back just in time, grabbing Jenny, shouting, "That's so dangerous." I have to say, Gina's acting skills are wasted not being an actress. In the instant the pilot turned back, all her malice vanished. She felt a little dizzy. "I was just holding her, almost fell over," Gina tried explaining. The pilot looked suspiciously, but the drugs took effect. Jenny's eyelids grew heavy. She wanted to speak up but had no strength, slumping to the side. Just as Gina claimed, it appeared she just fainted as she mentioned. The suspicion in the pilot's eyes eased. He helped position Jenny with Gina and warned, "Take good care of her. You'll soon be ashore. If anything happens to her, I'll report that it was your doing to Charles." Gina seemed momentarily flustered, disbelieving. "What do you mean by that?" "I mean, if anything happens to Miss Jenny, don't expect to make it ashore," the pilot said coldly. Turning back, the pilot focused on navigating toward the shore. Gina's eyes darkened, gritting her teeth in frustration, but she carefully held the unconscious Jenny, not daring to let go. 10 minutes later, the speedboat safely reached the shore. Upon landing, the pilot quickly called out to the personnel Charles had arranged to meet them. "Hurry, get Miss Jenny to the hospital," he exclaimed. Hearing this, everyone on the shore rushed over in panic. What happened? Seeing Jenny unconscious, a wave of anxiety hit them. The pilot glanced at Gina, who quickly spoke up, "I'm not sure. She just said she felt dizzy and fainted halfway here. Take her to the hospital now and have her checked." After a flurry of activity, Jenny was put into a car and swiftly taken to W Group's private hospital. Meanwhile, back on the yacht, things had already turned chaotic. Fortunately, the security was quite effective. They quickly caught anyone causing trouble. Charles stood at the top, watching the chaos below. The suspect, hearing he was to be taken to the police station, finally showed some panic, speaking out, "Why are you sending me to the police station? Isn't this a film shoot?" "What film shoot?" William stood right in the center, frowning in confusion. The suspect yelled, "Someone told me to come here and act like a big NPC, that the cameras were hidden, and to behave as if it were real, so I came." With those words, everyone was in an uproar. Just who could be pulling such a prank at this yacht party? William looked serious and asked coldly, "Then why did you only reach out to Gina?" "That's what the director wanted," he explained, starting to tear up. "They said since Gina's a public figure in the dance world, they gave me this script. Told me specifically to focus on her reaction." As he spoke, he struggled to grab his phone, almost in tears. "I'm not lying. I still have our chat logs on my phone. I'm just a regular extra. If I had known it was real, how would I dare to go along with it?" William immediately had someone retrieve his phone. After checking, it was just as he suspected. Someone had indeed given him the script and money, but they used a fake identity. "As long as I get paid, I don't care. There are so many unknown directors out there. How am I supposed to verify who's real or not?" he said, feeling wronged. William asked again, "Did you talk to them on the phone? Do you recognize the voice?" "Of course. He answered quickly. Was it a man or a woman? A man. Everyone on the floor was left puzzled, but something suddenly clicked for Charles, his face going serious. Just then, his phone rang. It was from someone on the shore. Charles felt a sense of urgency as he answered, "What's up?" "Charles, Miss Jenny has been taken to the hospital," they said. Charles felt his chest tighten, and he instinctively moved to head out, but he stopped himself, realizing they were separated by the coast. He gripped the railing tightly, his voice cold. "What happened?" "Miss Jenny fainted as soon as she reached the shore. The driver and Miss Gina don't know what happened. A doctor is checking her now." They hesitated briefly, then continued, "The doctor suspects. It's likely." "Likely what?" "That she was drugged." Charles's face turned ice cold for a moment. He suddenly remembered Jenny mentioning being drugged when she was brought here. But she should have been fine by now. How did she faint again on the speedboat? Pushing down his doubts, Charles's eyes remained on the center of the lower deck's hull. "I am coming to the shore right now. Take good care of Jenny," he instructed. Then, after a thought, he added, "Also, keep an eye on Gina. Don't let her run or get near Jenny." 10 minutes later, the yacht docked slowly. Charles left through a private passage. On his way to the hospital, he saw William searching for someone from a distance. Not giving it much thought, Charles quickly got into a car and left. Meanwhile, William was indeed looking for someone, Jenny. His informant soon returned with info. "Found it. From the surveillance footage, Miss Jenny left with." The informant hesitated before continuing, "With Charles." "My uncle?" William furrowed his brow. The person nodded. "Yes. Charles had lunch with Miss Jenny and then went to the lower deck. He was planning to take her on a speedboat, but Miss Gina coincidentally appeared. Given the situation, he let both of them go together." Hearing this explanation, William's expression remained tense, and a coldness flashed in his eyes. He curtly acknowledged, "Got it." Then, he instructed again, "Find out where they went after reaching shore." "Understood, we're on it now." The assistant nodded and then asked, "What do you want to do with this harasser?" "Wait for the police to handle it." William was agitated. Nothing seemed to be going his way today. At W Group's private hospital, Charles headed straight to Jenny's room. Jenny was still unconscious, and Gina was guarded outside. Seeing Charles, Gina immediately dropped to her knees. "Charles, I really don't know what happened. Please let me go." "You do have a knack for kneeling," Charles said coldly. He gave a signal to the bodyguards beside him, and they quickly dragged Gina away. Her tactic of playing the victim worked with William, but not with Charles. Gina's eyes showed a hint of shock but were quickly masked. She knew not to act out in front of Charles. Yet, if she didn't find a way to leave now, it would be too late. Once Jenny explained everything. Just as Gina was plotting her escape, a nurse's voice came from the room. "Miss Jenny is awake." In the white-walled room that smelled of disinfectant, Jenny leaned against the bedhead. Although conscious, she was still in a haze, feeling weak and unfocused. Her gaze was blurry until a familiar deep voice cut through. "Jenny, how are you feeling?" Her eyes moved towards the voice. It was Charles. Her mind, which felt adrift at sea, suddenly felt anchored. Jenny gently shook her head. "I'm fine." Her voice was so soft that Charles had to lean in to hear her. As he bent closer, his presence enveloped her, causing Jenny's ears to burn slightly. Charles then asked, "Do you remember what happened?" His question made Jenny's expression freeze. Memories before she fainted came flooding back. The driver had been coaxed by Gina at that time. If she said Gina intentionally harmed her now, would he believe it? As these thoughts crossed her mind, Charles seemed to sense her hesitation and spoke first, softly, "Don't be afraid. Whatever you say, I believe you." His words hit Jenny with a wave of emotion. After experiencing 2 lives, she had never been trusted or dared to rely on anyone. Now, Charles was the only one who unwaveringly believed in her. Her eyes welled up with tears as she prepared to speak. But suddenly, there was shouting from outside, "Don't run." The next moment, someone was at the door, reporting to Charles, "Gina got away." A cold glint appeared in Charles's eyes, his lips pressing into a thin line. Since Jenny had awakened, he wasn't concerned about Gina's whereabouts. But just then, he felt someone grab his arm. Jenny's eyes were reddened. It was Gina, she forced out from between her teeth. Charles's eyes darkened suddenly. "Was it Gina who did this to you?" "Yes, she even tried to push me into the sea." Hearing this, Charles's expression changed instantly. He commanded the person at the door in a harsh tone, "Go find her. Whatever it takes, find Gina." Once the person left, the grip on his arm finally loosened. Jenny held back tears in her eyes and just said, "Thank you." That simple thank you felt like it suddenly created a distance between them. Charles was stunned for a moment. Then the darkness in his eyes deepened, and a trace of helplessness appeared on his lips. "You don't need to be so polite with me." "I should thank you," Jenny insisted. Charles didn't say anything more, just stared at her silently. The atmosphere turned awkward. Jenny clenched her hands tightly, choosing not to say anything further. She could tell how Charles felt about her, she wasn't clueless. If the first few incidents were misunderstandings, now there were too many coincidences to ignore. But she needed to stay calm. She didn't want any entanglement with the W group again. The room grew strangely silent. Jenny broke the silence again. "I want to go back to Seaside Village. My students are waiting." She spoke without looking at Charles. Charles remained silent for a long while before he sighed. "I understand." 3 days later. Jenny was heading home from dance class when she saw William waiting at her door. As soon as he saw her, his expression turned furious and he yelled, "Jenny! You're too ruthless." His words were baffling. Jenny's face turned cold and she looked up. "What do you mean by that?" "I don't understand why you have to go against Gina," William said, disappointment written all over his face. "Did you tell my uncle that Gina was the one who hurt you?" "Ah, so he was here to defend Gina." Jenny found it laughable. She smirked. "Yes, I told him because it's the truth." "Why do you think I'm out to get Gina?" "Do you have proof?" "I ended up in the hospital, isn't that proof enough?" "My medical report isn't evidence?" "The speedboat driver saw Gina trying to push me into the sea, is that not evidence?" Jenny laid out the evidence one by one, and seeing the stunned look on his face made her find the situation amusing and absurd. She couldn't comprehend how she was ever in love with a man like this in her past life. But she remembered the lingering question she had until her last breath in that life. "William, I also want to know, when did you start liking Gina?" To her surprise, William frowned slightly. "I never said I liked Gina. I've never liked her." Jenny found it even more ridiculous. He'd done so much for Gina and claimed not to like her. In her past life, he'd married Gina. And now, he was denying it. Jenny felt exhausted from the absurdity and was too tired to argue. She turned to leave. But William's voice came tightly behind her. "I really don't like her. She once saved my life, and I promised her the best." "She saved you?" This surprised Jenny. She stopped and turned back to him, waiting for his further explanation. "In senior year, there was a fire on the school basketball court. She risked her life to save me," William explained. But to Jenny, this story was a surprise. She paused, then suddenly smirked at the memory. So, it was the fire that made William fall for Gina. Yet, it was clear, to her, it was she who had risked everything to carry the unconscious William out of the fire. They had been hospitalized together. In the end, Gina took the credit. Old Jenny might have been heartbroken over this, but now, having learned the truth, she felt only relief. Calmly, she looked at the man before her. "Is that so?" "Because during that fire, Gina wasn't even at school." William's face turned cold instantly. "Do you think I'd mistake my lifesaver?" Jenny looked deeply into his eyes, feeling no more emotions. Without another word, she turned and entered her house. Back in her room, she went to the storage box at the bottom of her wardrobe and pulled out a small student badge. William's name was on it, marked with burn marks. It was something she'd accidentally grabbed while saving him and clung to tightly until she fainted. Now, it just seemed like a joke. After a long look, she picked up the badge and returned to face William, handing it back to him. Since that's what you believe, this is yours. The moment the badge appeared before him, William's eyes widened in shock. Wasn't this lost after the fire? Why is it here with you? You must be disappointed. The person who saved you wasn't Gina, it was me, Jenny calmly said, looking up as she placed the badge in his hand. It had been over 10 years. But William inexplicably felt that the badge was freshly taken from the fire, scorching his palm. He stared at her in disbelief, his throat tight. You were performing at the auditorium, 3,000 meters from the basketball court. Yes, I did have a lot of strength then, to run from the auditorium to the court, Jenny recalled, her expression indifferent. I really can't believe I risked everything for someone so ungrateful. Her words stung. William couldn't muster a reply, feeling a lump in his throat. Then Jenny extended her hand toward him again. I gave back your token of life-saving. Now, it's time for you to return the music box you took from me. William looked a bit puzzled. What music box? Jenny froze on the spot. When she was 15. She was sick at home alone. It was William who found her with a high fever and took care of her all night. In her feverish haze, she gave him her cherished music box as a token. Since that day, her pure friendship with William began to change. She never saw him with the music box again, but thought maybe he was shy or had it hidden away at home. But his reaction now seemed like he had no idea about the music box. A startling guess started to form in Jenny's mind. Could it be that, like William, she mistook someone else? Do you remember that summer when I was 15, and I had a bad fever? Jenny asked, furrowing her brow. William nodded, remembering. I remember, you missed school for several days, and wouldn't let us visit you. Did you come to my house back then? The shock in Jenny's eyes deepened. William shook his head. No, we were told your illness was contagious. My family didn't let me go, but my uncle. Halfway through his sentence, he seemed to realize something and stopped. But Jenny had already caught on. Her eyes darkened. Your uncle came by? My uncle went to your house to deliver some project papers, that's all. William said. Jenny's heart suddenly jolted. Could she have been wrong all along? Seeing her stunned, William's expression turned unsightly. He tightly held a nameplate and couldn't hold back his question. Jenny, what exactly is your relationship with my uncle? His accusing tone was too self-righteous. Annoyed, Jenny looked at him coldly. This is none of your business. Her clearly distant attitude deepened the jealousy in William's heart. His gaze turned icy cold, and he grabbed Jenny's hand as she was about to go inside. If I could be in Charles's place, would you still treat me like this? His dissatisfaction almost spilled out with his words. Jenny's heart inexplicably ached, then she coldly replied, no. With that, she shook off William's hand and went straight inside. She didn't notice the look of malice that flashed in William's eyes. He pulled out his phone and, after hesitating for a moment, dialed a number without a name saved to it. Like last time, make it look like an accident. Don't screw up again. Jenny sat lost in thought in the living room, with William's words replaying in her mind. After all these years, the reason didn't really matter anymore. She genuinely liked William throughout her teenage years. But the person could have been Charles. At the thought of his name, an unfathomable feeling surfaced in Jenny's heart. She picked up her phone, intending to call Charles and ask, but her fingers hovered in the air, unable to press the dial button. She didn't know how to phrase her question. Should she ask Charles if he took care of her 10 years ago? Anybody would be speechless hearing such a question. Jenny sighed deeply. Forget it. Bringing up a mistake she made for so long would just make everything even weirder between them. Just as she was about to put down her phone, Charles's name suddenly lit up on the screen. Her heart skipped a beat. Jenny's hand shook, almost dropping the phone. After a while, she took a deep breath, trying to stay calm as she answered. Uncle was about to be her greeting, but she remembered him saying he wasn't much older than her. So she changed her words. What's up? The title made him pause for a moment, followed by a light chuckle. There was a hint of disappointment in his voice. Jenny felt inexplicably guilty, not knowing what to say. Luckily, Charles never let awkward moments linger. He soon got to the point. We found Gina, but her situation doesn't look good. His tone turned heavier as he spoke the last part. Jenny's heart sank. Thinking of William's angry visit earlier, she frowned. What happened? I'll get someone to pick you up. Charles didn't go into details and hung up soon after. That night, Jenny was taken to see Gina. She instinctively covered her mouth to keep from gasping. Gina lay on the hospital bed as pale as a ghost. Her body was covered in injuries, and her eyes were wrapped in white bandages. Gina was blind. She curled up in a corner, unable to bear any sound. When she sensed someone approaching, she would scream frightfully. Don't come near. I'm sorry. Please don't push me. I'll never do it again, let me go. Hearing this, Jenny's initial sympathy turned cold. Even while losing her mind, Gina tried to drag Jenny down with her. How scheming. Standing at the door, Jenny asked coldly, Gina, what happened to your eyes? At her voice, Gina jumped as if frightened and rushed towards the sound. You made it so I can't dance anymore, and now I can't see. Why do you hate me so much? Jenny's heart sank deep. She frowned and asked in a low voice, what nonsense are you spouting? Why would I do that to you? Gina covered her eyes, laughing through tears of blood. Because you want revenge. You said you'd make me suffer all the pain you endured in your past life. Instantly, Jenny froze in disbelief. What did you say? Jenny's eyes widened suddenly. What did Gina mean by that? Gina wasn't going to explain any further. Her bandaged eyes were bleeding, and she seemed oblivious. Once again, she used the method she was best at, kneeling, begging Jenny for mercy. It hurts, sis. I never hurt you, please let me go. Jenny's brows furrowed deeply. In the next moment, a strong hand pulled her back. Charles frowned slightly and said, the doctor says she's lost her mind. Don't pay attention to what she says. But Jenny remained where she was, staring intently into the hospital room. Others might not know, but she did. Gina wasn't crazy. She was painfully aware that she had lived through all of this in a past life. Back then, when Jenny found out about Gina and William's affair, William was already the head of W Group. He was so dominant that he didn't need to fear anyone. When he got tired of her, he straight up asked for a divorce. Already driven insane by the torment, she couldn't accept the outcome and refused to divorce. But Gina set her up to fall from the second floor, breaking her leg and blinding her. Ultimately, stripped of everything, she was kicked out of W Group by William, and J Group wouldn't take her back either. Alone, she wandered the streets until she froze to death. Living a second life, Jenny, though she resented them, never wanted to hurt anyone. All she wanted was to keep away from the people responsible for her tragic end. But now, Gina was experiencing the same fate she had suffered in her past life. First, her leg was injured, stopping her from dancing, even though Gina had orchestrated it. Now, she was blind. Past deeds, present consequences. Jenny wasn't kind-hearted enough to pity the person who had caused her death, but realizing this sent shivers down her spine. Her feet felt rooted to the spot, her face turning pale. Until a warm hand suddenly covered her vision. Charles softly said beside her, "Don't look anymore, it's not your fault." Her distant thoughts drifted back instantly. Jenny bit her lip tightly, tears streaming silently. She couldn't help but grasp Charles's coat hem. "I'm scared." The man's tall figure tensed up. Feeling the dampness in his palm, his heart clenched. It was the first time Jenny had shown weakness in front of him. No, the second time. Charles remembered an instance 10 years ago, although she might have forgotten, but he remembered clearly. Back then, she was feverish on the bed, holding his hand in a daze, murmuring, "Don't go, don't leave me alone. I'm scared." The soft girl from back then overlapped with the present woman biting her lip, stirring his usually calm heart. Unconsciously, he pulled her into his arms, his voice filled with unexpected tenderness. "Don't worry, I'm here." After they closed the hospital room door, Charles took Jenny into the adjoining room. Only when a long time had passed and she calmed down did Charles begin softly, "This isn't your fault. Gina did that to herself." Jenny froze. "What does that mean?" "According to surveillance, she was originally hiding in a hotel. But after a phone call, she got agitated, grabbed a fruit knife, rushed out, stumbled, and accidentally stabbed her eye." Charles looked a bit off. Jenny fell into deep thought. After a long while, she gathered the courage to look at Charles and speak. "What if I really did go through what she said about the past life?" The room went silent after those words. Jenny saw a hint of surprise in Charles's eyes. Her heart sank, and her gaze fell, dejected. It made sense. If Charles thought Gina's words were just madness, what about her own? She was about to change the subject when Charles suddenly looked seriously at her, slightly frowning. "Did you really go through such suffering?" The words stuck in her throat. Jenny was speechless. She didn't expect Charles to react this way, prioritizing her pain. Memories of her past life surfaced, the painful struggles she endured, and a bitter smile formed on her lips. After a long silence, Jenny spoke again, "It's okay. It's all in the past. That was from a lifetime ago." Charles's deep eyes lingered on her, his gaze falling before nodding gently, "I believe you." "What?" Jenny was startled. Charles replied calmly, "I believe what you said about your past life." Her heart skipped a beat. Staring at his serious and handsome face, she was overwhelmed with emotions hard to pinpoint. The two locked gazes, both silent, while an unspoken tension lingered in the air. William chose that moment to arrive. He took in the scene, a flicker of resentment in his eyes. Yet, when he stepped forward, his demeanor was perfectly composed. "Uncle, what happened to Gina?" His sudden voice pulled Jenny back to reality. She looked at William, with no intention to chat. She started to leave, but Charles stopped her. "No need to avoid this." He turned to William. "How's the investigation going on the suspect from the cruise?" Jenny paused, glancing over. William sighed, explaining, "According to the police, the guy wasn't lying. Someone hired him to act, but after analysis, the male perpetrator he mentioned is probably fake since a voice changer was used. No one knows if it's a man or woman." Charles frowned, pondering. "All right, keep looking into it." When the words fell, he calmly looked away from William and turned his attention to Jenny standing by his side. Unlike his previous cold demeanor, Charles softened his tone toward Jenny, right in front of William. "Scared you, didn't it? Let me take you back to rest," he said gently. William's face tightened. He was simmering with anger but unable to voice it. He could only watch helplessly as the two of them walked away together. His gaze remained fixed on their backs until they disappeared from sight. Only then did he turn and head to Gina's hospital room. When he saw the woman inside with her eyes bandaged, his expression turned cold. After sending everyone else out, William quietly entered the room. The sound of someone approaching made Gina nervous. Not knowing who it was, she started yelling, "Leave me alone. I won't do it again." The noise was grating. William covered his ears in annoyance. Then he leaned down and grabbed Gina's hand. "Stop pretending. It's me." The woman, who had been making such a fuss, immediately quieted down at the sound of his voice. Unable to see, Gina identified William's location by the sound and the feel of his arm. She tightened her grip on his hand. "William, you have to help me. I did what you asked. You can't abandon me. I'm in so much pain." Tears mixed with blood seeped through the bandages covering her hollow eyes, an unsettling sight. William frowned, his expression icy, though his words showed a trace of tender concern. "Gina, I've got you. I won't leave you hanging. But I only told you to feign insanity. What's going on with your eyes now?" Remembering her eyes, Gina's emotions surged. She clutched the hand in front of her and gritted her teeth. It's all Jenny's fault. It's her fault my eyes are like this. William's gaze darkened. What do you mean? Gina had always been sharp. This time, her trouble stemmed from Jenny's testimony, forcing her to flee. To William, this wasn't a big deal. So when Gina sought his help, he thought it would be easy. He found her a hotel to lay low temporarily. But then, in his dealings with the suspect's contacts, something in their tone felt eerily similar to Gina. Before the police could investigate further, William called Gina to check in. Hearing his questioning, Gina panicked right away. That's why Gina acted so frantic after the call. As for why she brandished a knife, only she truly knows. William initially intended for her to fake a mental illness to dodge charges from Charles, hoping it would prevent any convictions. But this idiot supposedly tried to attack Jenny and spouted nonsense about past lives. Are you trying to shorten your life or what? William's tone carried a hint of displeasure. Gina insisted, no, I'm not pretending. William paused, frowning with a scoff. Not pretending? You actually believe in past lives? I had a dream, Gina whispered as she bit her lip. In it, you married Jenny, Charles died in a car accident months ago, and you became the heir of W Group. Jenny didn't run away, but you divorced her a few years later. Her eyes were blinded, her legs broken, you sent her to a club, and she ended up dead on the streets. She came back this time for revenge. Her words sounded illogical yet somehow made sense. William's eyes widened briefly as he recalled something, almost believing her. But outwardly, he remained cool. You've clearly been pretending for too long, saying whatever nonsense comes to mind. It's just a dream. Gina paled, saying no more. William pushed her away, instructing, keep your crazy talk to yourself. Stay here and act insane. Wait a week, and I'll come for you. A week? Gina's ears perked up in confusion. William leaned down, whispering close to her ear, or maybe in 3 days, once that car accident in your dream happens and Charles is truly gone. When I'm the W Group heir, I'll definitely come back for you. Gina flinched as if realizing something, but she held her tongue. William left shortly after. He didn't notice Gina quietly turning off a recorder, a smile creeping onto her lips. 3 days had passed since Jenny moved into the main estate of W Group. Only the recognized eldest son of W Group could reside in the main estate. In a past life, even when William became the heir, he only gained entry after proving his capabilities in managing the W Group. Because of that, the main estate was like an unresolvable obsession for William. Even when he became powerful, he only returned on ancestor worship days, an act for show and nothing more. William couldn't reside there, and as his wife in a previous life, neither could Jenny. Yet now, she found herself living there under different circumstances. You can explore around here this morning. I have some matters to handle, but I'll come back to help with Gina's situation this afternoon, Charles said gently over breakfast. Jenny nodded, sure. The main estate of W Group spanned well over 500 to 600 square feet, practically a tourist attraction. After Charles left, Jenny wandered around. But the heat became unbearable, and she quickly returned to the villa. Seeing her come back, the villa's butler approached warmly, offering a handkerchief to wipe her sweat. It's rather hot out, Miss Jenny. Evening is a better time for a walk. Thank you, Jenny smiled warmly. You seem to have worked at W Group for a long time. The butler smiled back at her, then spoke softly, I've been here since the old master was alive. The old master and mistress gave me this good job, so I've stayed ever since. Charles grew up under my watch. In her eyes, William's family was nowhere to be seen. Jenny recalled the rumors about William's family. In the end, she hid her curiosity and didn't ask more. The housekeeper continued working, simply pointing upstairs. Miss Jenny, Charles said there's no place here you can't go. You can explore anywhere. I'd suggest you take a look upstairs. Upstairs? Jenny asked, a bit puzzled. What's up there? Check the storage room, she suggested with a mysterious smile. Jenny didn't want to overstep in someone else's home, so she awkwardly waved her hands. I think I'll pass. Aunt just laughed and grabbed her hand anyway. Don't worry, it's prepared for you. He won't mind. She led Jenny to the so-called storage room on the second floor. As the door opened, Jenny stood frozen in disbelief. The room was filled with photos and paintings, all of her. Is this? Jenny couldn't find the words. The housekeeper sighed beside her. When I saw the young master bring you home the other day, I was so happy for him. I thought he'd finally achieved his dream. But seeing him these past few days, he's still such a fool, not knowing how to make a move. It's the first time I've seen him care about someone like this. He's liked you for years, but he's so used to repressing it, he doesn't know how to ask you to stay. I heard you're leaving tomorrow. I couldn't just stand by, Miss Jenny. Please don't blame this old woman for meddling. The room was clearly cleaned every day. Not a speck of dust on any of the photos. They were all public photos of her, like when she was speaking at school, or showing off her achievements. The paintings captured her from unknown angles, like when she was running or quietly reading in class. She hadn't realized Charles was around all those times. Her eyes stung with emotion. Just then, her phone rang. The caller was Charles. Seeing all the portraits, Jenny's heart raced. She noticed who was calling and quietly left the room, giving Jenny some privacy to talk. Jenny's face heated up randomly. Trying to remain calm, she answered the call. Charles. Suddenly, there was an explosion on the other end. Jenny's smile instantly froze. What happened? She asked urgently. Charles's voice came back, strained and labored. I'm sorry, Jenny. His voice seemed to bear enormous pain. It sounded bad. Jenny's heart jumped. She rushed out of the room. Where are you? I'll come find you. She spoke, already grabbing her car keys and heading to the garage. But Charles stopped her. It's too late, Jenny. I just wanted to hear your voice and apologize. He coughed up blood mid-sentence. Blood gushed from his throat in large amounts. In front of him, a car smoked, and the seat trapped him completely. The driver ahead was unconscious. Sirens from ambulances and police cars sounded in the distance. Charles didn't know if he'd make it till they reached him. Earlier, Charles had lost consciousness once. From a young age, he was disciplined, healthy, and rarely remembered dreams. But this time, in endless darkness, he remembered Jenny's mention of past lives. He dreamt of his past life. Just like now, he'd been in a car accident. But in that life, Jenny had come looking for him. Back then, he'd wondered how she knew, and now he finally understood. She knew early on, so she came to save him. But in the past life, he died with unspoken feelings, life forever stopping at that crash. He never got to tell Jenny how he felt. As he opened his eyes again, smoke surrounded him. He didn't want the regret from his dream to happen again. Despite the pain immobilizing him, he reached for his phone, dialed a number, and heard the voice he longed for. Charles. Where exactly are you? Don't scare me. Jenny called his name for the first time. Her voice filled with fear and worry. Charles suddenly felt regret again. Don't cry, he said, straining against the pain to comfort her gently. When you cry, I just don't know what to say. His voice weakened as he spoke. Jenny's tears streamed down as she sat in the car, ready to speak again, but then the GPS announced, traffic alert for City A multiple vehicle accident occurred on Avenue. Rescue operations are underway. Please take alternate routes. Sorry for the inconvenience. In that instant, Jenny seemed to understand something. She slammed on the gas, racing toward the crash site. Charles. You better not have anything happen. I'm on my way. Okay, I'll wait for you. Charles's frail voice echoed through the car speakers, but then he coughed harshly, weakening further. After a while, he said, just in case, I still want to say, Jenny, I've liked you for a long time. There was a buzzing in Jenny's ears. Her vision blurred, but she quickly wiped it clear and spoke, Charles, I saw your photos and paintings. There was a pause on the other end, followed by a faint laugh. Good. There for you. Jenny, I might not make it till you get here. Goodbye. Before Jenny could reply, there was a loud bang in her ears. The call abruptly cut off. Jenny reached the river bridge, seeing the avenue ahead engulfed in flames from afar. She braked hard. Charles. It was a chain car accident. A truck driving in the wrong direction caused a rear-end collision involving over 10 vehicles. Charles's car was the second to be hit. It was crushed from both ends, resulting in severe injuries. The truck driver died on the spot, and there was one death and one injury in the first car. Charles was critically injured, barely clinging to life. We're using the most advanced equipment and medications to keep him alive, but chances of waking up are slim. Family should be mentally prepared, advised the doctor with a sigh to the W Group people. William and his parents are Charles's only legal family. Meanwhile, Jenny stood frozen outside the hospital room, watching the person inside silently. She couldn't believe that the person who had been speaking to her just moments ago was now lying here, unconscious. The same truck, the same accident. Does this mean she can't change Charles's fate at all? Jenny clenched her fists, her eyes turning red. Was it because she didn't pay enough attention to warn Charles more about accidents? Is that why this happened? Just then, a shadow cast over her, and a hand suddenly covered hers. Startled, Jenny stepped back and looked at William standing in front of her, frowning. What are you doing? Are you so eager to avoid me now? William's expression instantly turned icy. Jenny looked at him cautiously, the coldness in her eyes not fading in the least. I thought I made myself clear already. If you keep this up, I can report you for harassment. William just sneered, leaning down to whisper in her ear. You might regret this attitude toward me someday. Jenny stepped back, looking at him coldly. William didn't push any further, but cast a light glance at the person lying inside, smirked, and walked away. At first, Jenny didn't understand what he meant. But 3 days later, while she was keeping vigil in Charles's hospital room, she saw the news and understood. The female anchor on the news exaggeratedly announced into the camera, "Is Group W in City A about to change hands? It is reported that Charles has become a vegetable after the accident, and his nephew William now temporarily holds the CEO position. If Charles doesn't wake up, the future power of the W Group will transfer to William." Just seeing this news sent chills down Jenny's spine. How could this happen? Everything seemed to be reverting to the track of her past life. Had all her efforts been in vain after all? Gripping her phone tightly, Jenny's gaze inexplicably fixed on the heart monitor beside her. Charles still lay quietly on the hospital bed, the monitors beeping indicating he was still alive. Jenny gently held his hand, her eyes softening and becoming resolute. No, she had already changed fate. Charles was still alive, and she believed he'd wake up one day. Determined, Jenny quickly formulated a new plan in her mind. That afternoon, Jenny made a trip to the police station to revisit the results that Charles had initially been investigating. To her surprise, when the officer learned she wanted to follow up on the Gina incident on the cruise, he looked helpless and eyed her. Jenny, you and William playing at something? William just came by to withdraw the report, and now you're here asking for progress. Why would William withdraw? Mid-sentence, Jenny suddenly caught on. Jenny frowned deeply. Why would William, amid the busy takeover, remember to withdraw a report? Right then, the hospital head responsible for Gina also called her. Miss Jenny, patient Gina was taken by William. We couldn't stop him, sorry. Jenny's heart sank. He was blatantly covering for Gina. Furious, Jenny nearly crushed the material she planned to hand to the police. William, now the most powerful man in City A, would stop at nothing to get his way. Could she still trust these people? As she hesitated, a slightly familiar, teasing voice came from behind. Isn't this Jenny? Shut down the dance studio all these days, just to come to City A? Jenny turned around, seeing a tall figure in a police uniform. The face looked vaguely familiar, but she couldn't quite place it. Mike, the guy you nearly got in trouble with back in the village. The man noted her confusion and kindly reminded her. Jenny finally remembered the familiar face, that seemingly rogue cop. Coming to her senses, Jenny gave him a slight nod. Hello. Need any help? Mike raised an eyebrow, noticing her suspicion, and chuckled while explaining, forgot to mention, I'm Coco's dad. Jenny's expression shifted swiftly, realizing he's the dad never home with Coco. Mentioning his daughter, Mike's rough exterior softened. He smiled. Coco keeps asking about you, wanting you back soon. I happen to be in City A for work today. Let me know if I can help with anything. Feeling flustered, Jenny grasped the documents in hand and said, could you check the status of the cruise incident that was closed recently? Sure. After checking, Mike informed her, our investigation pointed to a young female between 20 and 30 as the mastermind. Everything clicked for Jenny. She understood why William urgently retracted the case. Thank you, Jenny expressed her sincere gratitude, hesitated a moment, and then handed over the documents. Also, could you look into Charles's car accident for me? Wasn't it just an accident? Mike seemed puzzled. Jenny shook her head. I suspect it's not an accident. He narrowly avoided another crash before. Here are the investigation materials from that earlier accident. Please trace it for me. All right, I got it. Mike's face grew serious as he accepted the materials, assuring her, I'll make sure you get the truth. Thank you. Jenny bowed deeply to him. 2 weeks later. Jenny, having received the results, drove over to the W Group headquarters. I want to see William. William sat in what used to be Charles's chair, looking smug. Jenny, I told you you'd regret it. At this moment, the ugly look on his handsome face mirrored what she remembered from her past life. Jenny stared at him with indifference. She had come to understand William's true nature. It didn't matter whether it was in the past or this life, he was bound to show his true colors. In the past, she had been blind to his malicious side. Jenny calmly smirked, I never said I regretted it. William looked momentarily surprised, but brushed it off as her being stubborn. Unbothered, he spread his hands, so what brings you here today? Of course, I wanted to see the mess you make when you fall from grace, Jenny chuckled lightly. It was clear William didn't like that. His eyebrows shot up, irritated. Why put up a front? Charles isn't waking up. Whatever you say here won't matter. William, how scared of Charles are you, really? Jenny asked suddenly, looking relieved. If you're saying that, it means you believe deep down that if Charles woke up, you'd be finished, doesn't it? William's face darkened almost instantly. He pressed his lips tightly together and retorted, cut the crap. If you're not here to beg, then get out. Jenny coldly looked at him. The one who should leave is you. Just as she finished speaking, the office door opened again. Mike led a group of police officers inside. Mr. William, we suspect you're involved with the recent series of car crashes. Please come with us to assist in the investigation. On hearing this, William's demeanor chilled. Evidence? We've apprehended the mastermind behind the scenes, and they've confessed your role. Mike paused, then pulled out a voice recorder. Plus, here's a recording from your accomplice Gina, presented after her arrest, which includes your motive to harm Charles. With evidence and witnesses piling up, what could you possibly say? On hearing this, William's face drained of color as he staggered back incredulously, eyes bloodshot. Impossible. How could you have found Gina? She confessed? She's already. As he spoke, he suddenly realized something and stopped, covering his mouth with a darkened expression. Mike looked at him keenly. Go on, why stop now? What he hadn't voiced was that Gina was already dead. On the night William took her from the hospital, he had killed her. Realizing he had no way to argue, William collapsed to the ground, defeated. His eyes lingered longingly on the chair he'd occupied for less than a month, still filled with unwillingness. But Mike didn't give him the chance to glance even once more. 2 officers grabbed him and led him away. The room quickly returned to silence. Jenny exhaled a long breath and thanked Mike sincerely. Serving the people is my duty, Mike grinned, then asked, Jenny, when are you reopening the classes? My daughter asks me every day. Hearing this, a hint of helplessness crossed Jenny's face. Looks like Coco will have to wait a bit longer. I think I'll wait until Charles wakes up. Despite the doctors saying the chances were slim, she still believed he would wake up. A month later. While Jenny was talking to Charles about her day as usual, she suddenly felt his hand grip hers slightly. A wave of immense joy surged through her heart, followed by more active fluctuations on the heart monitor than before. Jenny looked up and met those familiar deep black eyes. And then, she heard Charles's hoarse voice ask, "You still haven't given me an answer to my confession." His first words upon waking, and he remembered that. Jenny felt a mix of happiness and helplessness. She held his hand tightly, her eyes smiling brightly. "My answer is, Charles, I like you too."